freedom? You better flush that out your head, new guy. This isn't about freedom. This is a slaughter. If I'm going to get my balls blown off for a word, my word is podcast.
He really waits to say poontang, though. He really takes a beat before he says poontang, and you're like, huh, poontang. I didn't think he was going to say that.
Right.
Yeah.
You're not surprised that's the concept. You're surprised that's the word he chose to describe it.
Poontang. Okay, sure. Yeah. Here we are in Vietnam. Thanks for saying poontang to me.
Like we talked about,
that's what I would say to
just
him.
to front load this, we talked about this in a previous episode our guest was on in Heat, where Al Pacino talks about the concept of balling his wife. And it's like, that's never a term you should use to define what you do with your wife, right? And similarly, it's like, if you're talking about dying for something, I don't think you should call it poontang. I think you want to pick one of the other.
You know what? That shows you're not ready to die for pussy if you're calling it poontang. You're just not ready.
You're not ready.
You're not mature enough.
Right. A real man dies for pussy. And this is a film, of course, about defining what a real man is, something we will litigate for the next 2 hours on this podcast as 4 experts on masculinity. But I think that's a great point, and I think let's get this engraved above our door. Real men die for pussy. Boys die for poontang.
Finally, my lower back tattoo makes sense.
Now the context has been created.
You guys are the connoisseurs. I appreciate it.
Connoisseurs of context, one could say. This is a podcast called Blank Check with Griffin and David. I'm Griffin.
I'm David. Did you know that poontang is a corruption of the French word putain, which means prostitute?
Oh no.
I just looked that up.
Wow.
Well, now your lower back tattoo makes sense, David.
Yeah, exactly. Probably originated in New Orleans is the thinking.
And putain's also just used as like an exclamation.
Yes, yeah, putain. Yeah, right. You can say it as an expletive.
Putain's kind of used like as like a French fuck.
Yeah, those guys are crazy.
The French?
Yeah, the French.
Don't get me started.
The French.
The French. Look, this is a podcast about filmographies. Directors who have massive success early on in their careers and given a series of blank checks to make whatever crazy passion projects they want. And sometimes those checks clear, and sometimes they bounce. Maggots.
Hell yeah.
Ben, right before we started recording, producer Ben was like, Griffin, you might want to back up from the mic, because he was assuming I was going to boulderize one of the Ermey quotes for the opening. I don't want to have to do the work necessary to recite that. The
That's
dense
why you
level
hire
of
him.
word replacement. Well, delivery-wise, it's tough.
That's why you bring that guy in.
Yeah.
Right, it's tough.
But B, I might have to use podcast interchangeably for like 12 different words he uses.
Right. Yeah. Where do you put it? Yeah.
Right.
Oh, man.
You better unfuck yourself, or I will unscrew your head and shit down your podcast.
Yeah, you could take a
That's
small
pretty
piece,
good.
but I'm like, if I take one line, it feels like I'm half-assing it. The whole beauty of this performance is that every time he talks for like 6 uninterrupted minutes.
He keeps going, and you're like,
Right.
I'm still transfixed. I guess, Griff, you could have done the gun mantra, and replaced that with podcasts.
There are a lot of things I could have done. This movie has a lot of
that
iconic
occurred to me.
lines. I just liked saying that I would die
I liked what you did.
for podcast. Look, it's a miniseries on the films of Stanley Kubrick. Our guest has something to say.
I thought it could have been, remember, this was all just a bad podcast, fat boy.
Well, that's what we'll say at the end of the episode.
Yeah. That's what you'll say to me.
That's what I'll say to you.
Gee, thanks, guys.
You have the 1,000-mile stare, and I just go, hey, fat boy, remember, this is just a bad podcast. It's a miniseries on the films of Stanley Kubrick. It's called Pod's Widecast. Today, we've gotten to the last film released in his lifetime.
True. Sad, but true.
Just a wild thing to think about.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, this is it.
It's his penultimate film. He does not live to see the release of the final film. This is the first film in a 3-picture deal he signed with Warner Brothers that would remain incomplete.
Yes, that's funny to think about as well. But yes, and it was a hit, and it's an iconic film. It's an incredibly iconic film.
Yes.
I'm not saying that in some argumentative way. It's just when you watch it, even though this is, has a reputation that I'm sure we're all about to talk about. When you watch it, you're like, God, no one has imitated this better, or like no one has evolved what this movie does. The first half of this movie does. Like, we'll talk about it.
There's that Kubrick argument that sometimes comes up, certainly from his biggest fans, that like he made the single best film in every genre he worked in, right? That's a thing that Kubrick fans like to push forward as a notion. And it's not like I think this is thought of as the best modern war film, but I do think every war film after it is somehow defined by the shadow of this movie. You talk about how iconic it is. It is just like every element of this movie, you're sort of like, are you doing the Full Metal Jacket thing, or are you moving in the opposite direction of Full Metal Jacket, right?
Just say the movie's name and introduce our guest, and then
Full Metal Jacket, our guest returning to the show of High and Mighty, of Action Boys, pumping two guns, looking fit, let me say.
Wow, yeah.
Yeah, he's got a TV bod now. I mean, come on. He's leaving us in the dust.
He's a TV star. Jon Gabrus back on the show.
Feeling fit as I'm drink my second coffee of the morning.
I want to say, Griff, I was going to do the background you're doing, and I was just like, well, Griff's going to do that. I have to let him have that. Yeah. You have the Army Man, voiced by R. Lee Ermey.
Right. This film is... This is R. Lee Ermey's fourth best performance on film as a sergeant.
How many Toy Stories is he in? He's in a lot of them.
3. I mean, 1, it's the smallest role. He's sort of got the D3, the Mighty Ducks, Bombay, I'll show up at the very beginning and the very end thing.
Is he not a military guy in Saving Silverman? Because that would bump Full Metal Jacket down a whole nother one, right?
I was debating in my head. I was trying to remember what his status is in Saving Silverman. He is incredible in Saving Silverman.
He's so good. When he rolls out of the... I'm realizing I remember so little about that movie except how much I love it. So now I want to rewatch it. But I remember him tucking and rolling out of a van as like a surprising moment in the movie when I saw it.
His character name is Coach Norton. I cannot remember if the bit is that he's a vet who then became their coach, or it's just a coach who acts like a hyper intense military man.
Yeah.
Right. I can't remember which version of it is. It's one of his best performances. I remember him I think he takes a shit on a lawn in that movie. And there's like a wide shot of R. Lee Ermey with his pants down, like sort of smiling and waving as he's taking a shit. And seeing that with my father and him just saying, I can't believe they got him to do this.
Yeah. Well, it's so weird that his career, like every time you watch him, it's understood that creatively you've seen Full Metal Jacket.
That's the
you know
thing.
what I mean? Like it's such a weird thing where anyone who uses him in a movie is like, well, you've seen Full Metal Jacket, so we're either doing an homage to that or kind of pulling the rug out from that. Yeah, exactly.
But that's part of the weird legacy of this movie. Yes, right. Every time he's cast, it is like I was looking through his Wikipedia and there's stuff like several TV shows using the reveal of, oh, and our lead character's father is R. Lee Ermey, and you understand what that means in shorthand.
And it's like, this explains why this guy's such a nervous Nelly.
Right,
His dad is this guy. And everyone's like, oh, the dude from Full Metal Jacket.
Right,
like,
season 5, you reveal that he's House's dad, and you're like, well, that's the final piece of the puzzle. You don't even need to write this anymore. There's another one where he played someone's dad.
That's what I was trying to think of this. Like, I'm trying to think, because he popped up in so many things over the years. Like, and he's in 7, you know?
Yes, which is
really
great
good
in that,
7,
but that's
actually.
a really interesting use of him.
It is.
Briscoe County Jr., the
he's
Bruce
Janitor's
Campbell
dad,
show.
Right? On Scrubs, I think.
Yes, he is. You're right. Yes. And it's like he was tough on him. Yeah, or whatever.
Right. Is he on Prison Break? Does he play someone's dad in Prison Break? No.
No.
I'm sorry. He plays prison warden on SpongeBob SquarePants. That's what
the whole map of the prison was tattooed on him, and no one thought to check.
They checked his butt. They didn't check his.
They did
his tattoo. It's a wild career he has, and it is a career that's just like, you exist as like a permanent piece of like the tapestry of American pop culture in perpetuity, and everyone will now hire you to redo that, riff on that, or subvert that.
if you watch this movie for the first time now or recently,
Yeah.
You could like retroactively understand everything about Arlie, or you know what I mean?
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
it's like watching American Gigolo now, and then you're like, I see why everyone was obsessed with him. Now. Like,
Right.
with Gear, like it comes to you
Yeah.
where you're like, oh, I never understood why everyone was obsessed with this person. Then you see the movie that makes everyone upset, and you're like, oh shit, yeah, I mean, I'm on board.
Hopkins and Silence of the Lambs is like a similar thing. Not
Dude,
that
we
like
just watched it for Action Boys.
Yeah.
It's so funny you choose that. It's like,
Right.
see, and Jodie Foster even arguably
Yes.
in that movie.
Yeah.
You watch it and you go, well, this explains. I mean, Jodie Foster, that's like her 70th movie at that point.
Right.
But you're like, oh, of course, Anthony Hopkins should get to do whatever the fuck he wants. I'm going to start calling him Sir Anthony Hopkins at this point.
But there's also just that thing of like with this too, where you're like, this character is so parodied. He has so many times done the parody himself. You imagine going back and watching the original thing, it will be devalued. And
Right.
instead, it's like, no, it strengthens it.
Yeah, I feel like Star Wars, not to activate you fucking dorks, but Star Wars suffers from like the over parodying. Like when you go back and watch the original trilogy, you're
Yeah.
like, this is like, it's hard not to see a Mog
Yeah,
instead of a
yeah.
Wookiee. But Full Metal Jacket, you don't watch this and go like, oh, you just do it like this. You're like, oh, this is the fucking nexus point
Well,
of the creation of the idea of a drill
this-
sergeant in a
right.
movie.
Yes. This is my thing. I just watched a movie at TIFF this year called The Inspection. That is an A24 movie that's coming out this year. That's a debut from this guy called Elegance Bratton, which is one of the best names I've ever heard.
Incredible.
Elegant.
Yeah.
Just incredible.
Yeah.
Elegance Bratton. And it's him telling his true story of his life. He was kicked out of his house when he was a teenager by his mom for being gay. He joined the Marines and he served in the Marines for years. But it's like set only in basic training, right? It's a drill sergeant movie. It's set in basic or boot camp, whatever you want to call it. And it's a good movie, and it does lots of interesting things with being like a gay guy in the 2000s in the Marines. But I think it knows, because every movie knows, that everyone knows Full Metal Jacket.
Yeah.
Like, let's not try to mess with that. Everyone knows the structure of being in basic training or in boot camp in the military and being
Right.
barked at by a guy with a hat with like a circular brim. Like, we just
We
know
all
that
learned
no
that.
one's going to
Yeah.
fuck with that. Like, Bokeem Woodbine plays the drill sergeant in this.
Oh,
He's good.
Love
casting.
Bokeem. Yeah.
Good casting. And it's a different character. I'm not saying the movie is some Full Metal Jacket ripoff. I'm just saying, like, I've never seen anyone try to subvert this movie's presentation of that, and because you
know
can't
what?
really.
No, you can't. You can't. And it was like they would just get Arlie Ermey to do this again. Like, to his credit, he was not one of those guys who was like, look, I've already done the definitive. I'm not going to try it again. Right? Like, you could just
Right,
pay
right.
him and get him to do this again and it would work. Not a movie I like particularly, but like Hacksaw Ridge is one of the only movies I think to get around this where it's like, oh, get Vince Vaughn. He's like a different type of motor mouth. He's scary in
Right.
odd ways. He has so much baggage himself as a movie star. It's just inherently different enough from Arlie Ermey that you're not saying, oh, they got the cheap Arlie Ermey, which I feel like so often you do. So often you watch a movie where the drill sergeant shows up and you're like, you really weren't willing to pay Arlie Ermey the extra $40,000.
Right. Come on. The guy does stuff. He's
Right.
not hard to book.
Right.
Just to stay on Hacksaw Ridge for 1 second.
Yeah.
My experience with that movie was watching it the whole time going, what the fuck is Andrew Garfield doing vocally here? This is insane. Oh my God, this movie's a fucking cartoon, blah, blah, blah. The whole time I'm bugging out, like 2 hours. They do the classic credits biopic thing where we see real footage of the guy, and the real guy sounds crazier than Garfield. And I'm like, oh my God. Oh my God.
It's
Garfield
true. You're
Garfield
right.
is like rounding the edges on how crazy this dude sounds. And
The
it's
real
making-
guy was a talking stick of cord. Like, he genuinely was. Yes, he was. It's true.
He was like actual Gomer Pyle, like Jim
His
Neighbors.
voice was insane, and I'm going, "Wow, actually, Garfield brought this character to life in a digestible way." Now, so thank God they put that. They were like, "Just so you know, he wasn't just off the fucking reservation doing this. Take a look."
Yeah.
I feel like we're forgetting something.
What are we
And
forgetting?
that's Major Pain. Okay, because
All
boy.
right, fair.
that answers your question, David. Subverting.
How to subvert it.
Yeah. And do it well.
Now,
In which your answer is do it to children.
Major Payne, which was, of course, directed by Nick Castle, right? Directed
Yes.
by Michael Myers himself.
The Shape?
The Shape himself. I've never seen it, but it's Damon Wayans screaming at a bunch of children, right? That's the idea?
Yep.
Yes, okay.
What is that genre there? It's so recurring in our lives. I'm a little bit older than you guys, but everyone was like, okay, they're a crazy action star or a total badass. It's like, all right, now they're a nanny. Now they live in the suburbs. Now they're a house cleaner. Now they're a babysitter. It's like they just get like, it's like, let's give one of these alpha dudes a chick's job and watch how fucking funny it is. It's like
it's truly one of those things where like Twins was Schwarzenegger's highest grossing film up until that point in time. And then I think Kindergarten Cop might have been number 2. And if it wasn't, it was so big and it immediately like expanded his audience base. Like I think there was,
that's the thing. It was, you need one of these. That was the idea. Right. Even if it's not going to be your biggest hit, you need that.
It was the quantifiable thing of like, look at how much bigger Terminator 2 got because now kids like him. And now every guy has to go through that. There's the point where it's like, you start out being a badass, then you go back down to the kids, and then you make the badass movies that are a little more family friendly.
Right.
You know, the classic Matthew Modine arc.
Very similar to that, right? This is the kind of movie the kids love.
Yeah.
Bro, we're talking about how iconic this movie is, how iconic Arlie Ermey's role is, all this shit, how iconic D'Onofrio's the pile.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's half the movie.
Less.
It's 45 minutes.
Yeah.
Now, I feel bad because I'm coming on this podcast where people just love to hear my really interesting and insightful opinions. And my take on Full Metal Jacket is the first part's the best part and the second part isn't as good. AKA everyone's opinion on Full Metal Jacket. Like, I'm not coming on here, but it's the first part is, in my opinion, like knife perfect, some of the most incredible stuff Kubrick ever did. I think it's amazing. Go
hands
on,
down.
Talk, John.
I'm saying this is one of those movies that when you see it, I saw it young. I was into Clockwork Orange. I got like the Kubrick box set, was like the first DVDs I bought, and I watched this and I was like, I fucking love this movie. And then like 3 years go by, I watch it again, and you're like, oh right, they do go to war in the second half of the movie. Like sometimes you remember this movie and you forget about the rest of the movie. It's all takes place in the barracks in your mind, at basic.
It's Paris Island. Yeah, it's a little bit like Stripes. Except
Yes!
The difference is, I do think the rest of this movie is good. Like, Stripes is a movie where you don't remember anything that happens after basic training because it's kind of bullshit.
It's not good. Yeah, and it's like
right.
a little misogynistic.
Right. Every time I watch this, I am like, the rest of this is better than I remember it being. Like, that's the annoying part of the very obvious take we're going to have here, is it's like, on one hand, inarguably the first 45 minutes are the best part. But also, the rest of the movie is underrated, but also it can never come out from the shadow of the first 45 minutes.
It's a crazy dynamic to land in that the second half of the movie isn't as strong as the first half of the movie and is still maybe the strongest representation of war ever recorded on film. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like one of those experiences where you're like, oh man. And like, on this rewatch, Tiff came home during a post-basic training and sat down, and she was like, God, this movie is so fucking good. It's so fucking beautiful. And I was like, right, and you didn't even watch the first, so you're not going like, oh, now we're here. Like, you have none of that. If you just sat down at the first, Boku Bucks scene, if you sit down at that point and you're like, fuck, this movie is magnificent. It's intense and disgusting and magnificent. But the first half of the movie prepares you for all that shit too. Like,
it's that weird thing where if the entire film was one half of the movie, it would probably have a better reputation. Like, even if the films, they cut all of the Paris Island stuff out and they added 20 minutes on, with Boku Bucks as the starting point, as you said, Gabrus, I think this movie
Right.
would have a better reputation because it wouldn't be fighting against the idea that it's a disappointment to the standards it sets up for itself. I found some quote that like Billy Wilder said that he thought the first 45 minutes were the best movie ever made.
I think there's an argument for it. Like, I was watching it again. I threw it on. I've seen Full Metal Jacket a few times, but I'm like, all right, time to watch Full Metal Jacket. I put it on.
Steelbook?
And exactly. Yes, my Steelbook. And for the first time, I'm really thinking about it because I'm watching for the podcast. This is a movie that like my dad had told me all about before I'd even seen it. Like he described Vincent D'Onofrio killing himself, like all of it. Like I think this movie just really buried into his brain. And
relatable as fuck, David.
Thank you. And the first 20 minutes, you don't even see anyone talk to each other. It's just Arlie Ermey yelling at them and them marching in formation. The first time anyone even speaks to each other is Modine finally helping, Gomer Pyle D'Onofrio like load his gun.
And at that point, it feels like the greatest act of compassion you have ever seen.
Exactly. It's so powerful for that very reason. And like, I was just thinking about how I love military movies. I love war movies. Like, but you just get a lot of the sort of like the guys hanging out, and one of them's like, yeah, well, hell, I'm from, South Carolina, and this is what I do. And the other guy's like, oh, I'm a nerd, and I'm from, New Hampshire. Like the little sort of privates talking to each other stuff. And like, we're just not given anything like that. We're not given any humanity because the whole point is that this guy is shaving their humanity away. Like, they're not allowed to be humans. They have to be, living guns.
And
it's amazing.
It's amazing, and to establish that, but also to get us to be able to differentiate the bald white people in the movie.
Yes,
this is like this is corny, but it's like an improv opening. He like runs around each character and is like, "You are Joker. You are the funny one. You are smart. You are Cowboy. You are the Texas one. You're the black guy. You're the fat idiot that's going to ruin this for us." And it's like he just runs around and labels everyone. And this is talked about a lot, but everyone is in focus inside the back. There's no blurriness. Like it just is focus, full focal length. So it's just like everyone is on the same level, quote unquote, but Arlie Ermey's running around explaining to us who we need to know to watch the rest of the movie.
And none of these characters have backstory. There's not a lot of conventional characterization, even as the movie goes on. So basically, especially with this starting group, it's like he's telling you what everyone's game is. And the level of characterization you get is like the most obvious joke that the world's biggest asshole would latch onto upon seeing someone and hearing their voice.
Right. It's like, oh, you're a gay intellectual because you have like a smart ass answer. Oh, you are a giant slow person because it took you a second to answer. Oh, you're from Texas, so you're a gay cowboy. Oh, you're black, so I have awful things to say to you. You know?
Just crystallize it. There's like that stand-up thing, how most stand-ups like starting out, I'd say up until someone has like their first special and has really like built an hour that has been out there in the world, most people open their sets with like, I know what you're thinking.
Right. This is what I look like. I chose this outfit, but I have a joke for it.
This is what I sound like, And it's like, he's essentially doing that to them. It's like, I'm going to make the joke so the audience gets on my side before they think it about me. And he's doing that to pinpoint characters you need to remember.
It's crazy how little we know about everyone.
Nothing.
And then how much it affects you later on in the movie and you're like, holy shit. Like you are heartbroken when Cowboy dies.
Yeah.
Like, spoiler. You are heartbroken when a character who you only know their nickname and haven't even seen for like 20 minutes in the movie, but like because you're following Joker and he's looking for him, you get like in the same level of attachment. And like then you realize, oh, of course they're totally friends. They had like their drill sergeant and one of their like squad mates die in front of one of them, like in a room that the two of them were just cleaning the day before. Like there's so much going on with still so little info. Like we don't even know Joker's real name until you like see if you catch his crew neck sweatshirt at one point.
Right. And Ben, for the sake of this episode, we're going to retire a bit. Otherwise, it'd just be too much of an editing hassle. We will call him Private Joker by name.
Oh yeah, no, we're not going to do that.
Yeah, it's a different Joker. This guy actually does not find crime funny.
We know why he's so serious.
We actually have a very good sense.
Full Metal Jacket,
Mhm.
Stanley Kubrick's film, 1987,
Yeah.
based on the novel The Short Timers by Gustav Hasford.
This
What
is
do you
a
wanna
fucking
say,
80s
Gabrus?
movie. This is an 80s movie.
I know.
Like, it's crazy that this
It
movie
is.
came out in the late 80s. Imagine someone's like, we're having 80s night, and you put on Full Metal Jacket. Or oh, it's 80s night at the club, and you dress like Arlie Ermey or something, and you're like, it's an 80s. Like, it's so not indicative of even like, because the Kubrick style, of course, too, is not it's not modern in any way. So it feels like when you're watching it with between the music and the footage and the subject matter, you're like, when was this movie fucking made? And then when you realize it came out in 87, you're like, I was 5. What the fuck was like 20-year-olds thinking when this movie came out? That must have been crazy.
It is wild. I mean,
It's in.
No, what are you gonna say, David?
Well, I was just going to talk about this is the time when Vietnam movies are suddenly everywhere.
Right.
Because obviously there's the Deer Hunter and Apocalypse Now in the late 70s that are sort of the twin like masterpieces, but those are very like big operatic unrealistic movies.
But we're in the realm of Platoon,
Casualties
Rambo.
of
86
War.
comes Platoon.
Yeah.
Right. And then in 87 you have Gardens of Stone, Full Metal Jacket, Hamburger Hill, Good Morning Vietnam. Like you have 4 like sort of more like this is what it was like in Vietnam.
Uncommon
movies. And then
Valor, like a
Casualties of
weirdly big
War.
hit that everyone thinks is
Uncommon
shitty.
Valor.
Oh,
Right.
Casualties of War, the least rewatchable movie ever made.
Casualties of War is one of the most upsetting movies ever made. But like that's what I mean. Like, and Born on the 4th of July, obviously, is 89 as well. Like, there's this whole realm of late 80s movies about Vietnam where they're like, okay, we're going to depict the war in its utter like foolishness and pointlessness and bleakness. Like, there's these are not going to be like what you've seen before. And like we haven't really had that for like the Iraq War. I guess we've had a few sort
they
of
didn't
major
work.
movies about
I mean, like
that.
like Jarhead
yeah.
feels like it's very much trying to be the Full Metal Jacket
Yes.
of
Man,
its generation.
yes.
Yeah.
Have you seen on Netflix that there's like 5 Jarheads and
Yeah.
they've completely abolished the idea of like any
Yes.
like it's just like Jarhead 2 Marine Revenge. It's just like killing.
I think we've talked about this before, but I think one of them is called Circle of Fire or something like that.
Let me look it up.
I think it's
Let
the
me look it
Cole
up, because
Hauser one. Cole Hauser now does a lot of the Jarhead movies.
Does he really?
Jarhead
Jarhead
2
sequels.
Field of Fire.
Field of Fire, right? And that's then Jarhead 3, The Siege.
Uh-huh.
Was there a Jarhead 4? Jarhead 3 has Scott Adkins.
Okay.
Wow.
Jarhead 4 has Devon Sawa.
I mean, Jarhead obviously just a slang term for a soldier, a Marine. So I guess it's a pretty fungible title. You can use it however you like.
Jarhead 2
Obviously,
Field of Fire. Bokeem Woodbine. I'm sorry. I just had to.
I mean, the guy works.
The guy works.
The guy
He's
will
good.
do a good job for you if you ask him to. That is a classic guy who will do a good job
Absolutely.
no matter what the project. Yeah.
How far away are we from Full Metal Jacket : Hartman
about
Rising
to
or
say.
some shit
5
where
minutes.
like the origin story of
Joker's
Arlie-
Revenge.
Yeah. What man? They should cast fucking Modine in Retired Bit 2 Folie à Deux.
They should. They should bring all the Jokers together.
Yeah.
They should do a Full Metal Jacket sequel. They bring back D'Onofrio inexplicably. They're just like, he's back.
Cyborg.
Look, he's the right size. Yeah. Who
They
cares?
should cross over with other Vietnam movies.
Yes.
Apocalypse Now
Oh,
meets Full
please.
Metal Jacket.
We need a nom-verse.
Yeah.
It would be awesome if Joker was on Robin Williams' talk show. Well, jumping back to what David said about all these Vietnam movies come out, but every one of the ones you mentioned felt like a modern movie when they came out too. Even though it's taking place like 10 plus years ago, they still felt modern. Like the Platoon felt like a modern movie. This somehow feels like, and I think it's because of all the basic training, all the parasite stuff, feels a bit like a documentary. Like it feels more in the moment. And I know we're just, we're talking craft, like it's Kubrick as well, godfather of realism, but like there's something different about this. I mean, obviously the tone of Good Morning Vietnam is different, but there's something about this movie that all the other movies are like war is hell, man, and this one just fucking feels anachronistic, I guess, is like
it feels
big thing.
totally out of time. You look at Ebert's review for this movie when it came out, and he says it's one of the best looking war movies ever made on sets and stage, which is like a real backhanded compliment, because then he follows it up by saying it's not enough to compete with the quote awesome reality of Platoon, Apocalypse Now, and The Deer Hunter. Like a lot of the sentiment at the time, even more than the first 45 minutes are the best part, when you read reviews from this movie's release, is like, well, the rules have changed. We have movies like Platoon that feel so visceral and real, like the way we're like able to actually depict combat on screen. Kubrick doing this on sound stages isn't the same. Like this movie is not as harrowing in its viscerality or whatever, you know?
I agree. I mean, I think, again, I hate being basic about this movie, but I do think it's weird that it was shot in London. Like, not even fucking Northern England or whatever. They just shot it in London.
Wait, but how do you know that, David?
Well, two reasons. One, I did grow up there. But two, I read the dossier as well, which explains it.
It's crazy when you see this movie as a young person and don't know that there are parts of Vietnam that aren't a jungle. Like I'm not like
yes.
That's fair. Because we all have one image of it.
Yeah,
right.
I'm a grown up now, and I
yes.
understand how countries look, and it's always represented in our movies. But at the time, just seeing like a city, and it felt so, and then that kind of felt like one of those powers of the limitations of wanting to only shoot in London.
This is the thing. I mean, it's like a stylistic choice, but at the time, people were sort of dinging him by saying like, that's not how it works anymore. We've seen Platoon. You can't do this now.
And he's like, I shot fucking 2001 here. I think we can handle. I showed you Mars here. I think we can handle Vietnam.
It's funny to your point about this not feeling like an 80s movie. It's like he only made 2 films in the 80s. You know, one at the top of the decade, one at the end. It's The Shining and this. And he worked within 2 genres that were running wild in the 80s. And the 2 movies feel so disconnected from all of the trends that were happening in those genres, and yet were like big hits. Like the fact that The Shining comes out in the same decade as like Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, most of the Halloween franchise, you know? Texas Chainsaw sequels, Child's Play, like all this shit, right? Not to mention just like the endless barrage of Stephen King movies in that decade. And as we're saying, like Vietnam was like a fertile fucking subgenre in this period. And he's making this movie that feels totally out of time and place with this. I think about, you know, they'll do like, studios will like reissue all of their DVDs for Walmart with like the slip covers, trying to rebrand them in some way, and they'll do like totally 80s collection.
Right.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm.
To like make it seem like a party. I just remember seeing one of those once where it was like Paramount had their like totally 80s collection where they redid the cover art to make it all look like the inside of the Max from Saved by the Bell or whatever. And then including that collection was The Accused.
Oh, God. Love the 80s.
And this,
I heart the 80s.
It feels like what you're saying, Gabrus. It's like you can't file this in your mind as an 80s movie.
Yeah, I like forget. Like when I just looked it up, I was like, where did this fall in his? And I was like, his second to last movie. Yeah. Oh my God, this movie's a couple years. It's on video in the early 90s. Like that's just so crazy to imagine. Like, and I was a lot like that was my childhood, and it feels insane to. And like Full Metal Jacket was just like in the culture. Like you just knew about it, even though it was like the most adult movie ever. You knew about it as like a child, like instantly. Fucking
that you could use it as fucking shorthand in Toy Story.
Right.
David. Mm-hmm. No matter how much we try to prepare for the holiday season, the chaos always comes. I'll share an example. Lines at the post office.
Oh,
trying
so chaotic.
To ship out some gifts. Not even our Lee Ermey could whip the holiday season into shape, if you catch my drift. Trying to draw any line between the movie
Yes, that is very true.
Subject of this episode in this ad.
But it's not too late to get your holiday mailing and shipping under control.
No.
With Stamps.com. Sign up now and you'll be printing your own postage in minutes because Stamps.com is your one-stop shop for all your shipping and mailing needs.
And this is the mailing season. You want to send out some holiday cards? You want to send out some gifts?
Yeah. You can get access to USPS and UPS services you need to run your businesses right from your computer. No lines, no traffic, no hassle.
How nice to receive a holiday card, you know?
It is nice.
In this era of emails and texts and TikToks and B-reels.
Yes.
I got a Sims Family holiday card still affixed to my fridge with a magnet. I loved receiving it in the mail.
Yeah, that was nice, right?
Yeah.
Did you get the wedding one?
I did. I have like 4 different.
I mean, we send them out.
I
They're
know.
fun.
JJ Birch, a researcher, he sent me a lovely holiday card last
I want
year.
a JJ card. I think I did get that. Yes, I remember.
It's
that.
a good
Okay,
one.
listen. You can use Stamps.com to print postage wherever you do business. All you need is a computer and a printer.
Oh, yeah.
And if you need a package pickup, you can schedule it through your Stamps.com dashboard.
Easy peasy.
They've got switch and save features so you can compare carriers and rates because they're always changing.
I love to switch
and it works
save.
seamlessly with all major shopping carts and marketplaces. So this holiday season, trade late nights for silent nights and get started with Stamps.com today. Sign up with promo code CHECK for a special offer that includes a 4-week trial, plus free postage, and a free digital scale with no long-term commitments or contracts. Just go to Stamps.com, click the microphone at the top of the page, and enter code CHECK. Let me tell you a little context about Full Metal
Please.
Jacket, okay?
Please.
There's 7 years in between The Shining and Full Metal Jacket,
Mhm.
and obviously Kubrick's career slows down a lot, which we've talked about. Like he takes longer to make movies, but it isn't just like persnicketyness or laziness or whatever. It's or his attention to detail or whatever Kubrick myth you want to run. It's that he's exploring tons of stuff that he can't make. His ambitions are so massive. I feel like that. He's trying to, in the 70s, he's trying to make the Napoleon movie happen, and it's just such a huge ask. And in the 80s, he's trying to make artificial intelligence happen. That's sort of his biggest unrealized project. And again, he's just running into the technology isn't there yet, right? Like that's the sort of big problem with AI, which obviously Steven Spielberg eventually makes. And then apart from that, he just reads books all the fucking time and is waiting for a book to capture his interest. And he reads The Short Timers. I'm assuming nobody's read The Short Timers. I have not read.
I have not read The Short Timers. I will cop to having seen this movie 10 times, and on this viewing, notice that it's based on a story. So,
the thing, I've never read it. It's very short. I should have maybe thought about reading it. Actually, it's like not even 200 pages long. It has the exact same structure as this movie. It's 3 sections. It's like boot camp, and then
journalism, then
him as a journalist, and then the whole sequence with the sniper. And so he's taking the book, and obviously he co-wrote the movie with Gustav Hasford, who wrote the book.
Well, but there was a lot of fighting over that.
There's a lot of, but he has a credit.
He does. I think they wanted very badly for it to be obviously based on the book by an additional material, and there was an ongoing arbitration fight. Kubrick apparently only met him once,
but he certainly likes the book, and I do like his take on it, which is basically like it's not pro-war or anti-war. It seemed only concerned with the way things are, which feels like a very Kubrick. Something that would appeal to him, right? Where he's like, this is trying to present this in all its frightening realism, and then we can decide what we do with that information, rather than it's a polemical thing.
The other thing I saw was that this period of time he was kind of looking to make a Holocaust film, and he is such an adapter. He never generates his own material, that he kind of was constantly on the hunt to try to find the right starting point, and then in that hunt he finds this instead and just shifts over, I think, that energy to this. But we've talked about, war is the thing he goes back to most in his
back to the most. Right. 100%. Right. Michael Hare, who's the other listed co-writer, he wrote that book Dispatches, which is about his life as a war correspondent in Vietnam. That's like a classic of new journalism, and that's like another thing that Kubrick wanted to adapt.
Right.
So he's kind of got both those things floating around, and when they find The Short Timers, they're like, well, there's a story here,
right?
So why don't we make this the movie,
right?
And you can work on it with me. because Dispatches obviously does not really have like a narrative to it. It's journalism. It's
yeah.
this
So
and
he
that.
sort of absorbs the writer from one piece of material to help him adapt a different piece of material. Hare apparently said to him, like, don't meet Hasford. You're not going to like this guy. And Kubrick was like, what are you talking about? I have to meet him. And then he met him and was like, you were right. I shouldn't have met him. I don't like that guy.
I mean, I think if you're gonna say Kubrick, I don't know if you're gonna like this. Stanley, I don't know if you're gonna like this guy. You're gonna be right 70% of the time.
Probably.
Like just rolling the dice wise.
Yeah.
I don't think a lot of people get into Kubrick's orbit that he's like, now this guy I like.
Yeah, he fought for his credit beyond just like additional dialogue or story or what, he fought for his screenplay credit. He won. He says he for the quote from him is a little Canuck friend of mine would say, I kicked a butt. I don't know what that's a reference to. I'm going to be honest.
Yeah.
My
I think
Hare's reaction
maybe
is
Terrence and Phillip. Is that a Terrence and Phillip?
yes,
Yeah.
of course. No, that's what it is. Yes. As a little Canadian friend of mine would say,
Very little.
Just a fart noise here.
She said, so I said to Stanley, shut your fucking face, Uncle Fucker.
Hare's reaction is like, he deserved the credit. It was not that complicated. Like, he doesn't seem too beat up about it. So I don't know. Like, Hasford seems to have this take of like, I had to fight tooth and nail. And Hare's take is like, I don't know. I guess so. I don't mind. And Kubrick's take is like, cut to a gravestone because he's dead. So we don't know what he said.
It's funny you say that because on this watch, I was most attracted to or most drawn in by the journalism stuff, like the middle chunk. And it's not just because of how attractive Lieutenant Lockhart is, but the in the rear with the gear, quoted by StarCraft Marines.
Yeah, hell yeah, Gabrus. All right, maybe we played each other on BattleNet sometime in the 90s.
Yeah, let me know if you ever went
Who's
up
to
against
say?
Uncle Meatman on BattleNet. I've been playing
An
fucking
unsurprising choice of username.
I've been playing StarCraft 2 for 20 years. I just played the campaigns over the pandemic just to stay alive.
Hell yeah.
But the journalism shit drew me in so much more than previously, and that's because in my age since watching this, I went from being like a warhead to being like, and it's
podcaster,
funny, to being a podcaster to being into journalism and having leftist point of view, and it's like all of a sudden now I'm like intrigued by Joker's kind of rebellious attitude, and like his like intellect appeals to me more than like when you're a kid. You like Animal Mother because he's like such a badass,
right?
And you like lose all the and then when you watch it again, you're like, I
Terrifying.
can't believe I like that guy.
That guy has way too many bullets on his person.
Way too many.
Way
You don't
too
think he
many.
needs that many?
No,
I don't know. Based on how he's going, I don't think he has enough based on his behavior in the back.
He does shoot them a lot. I'll say that. It's all, he doesn't
He's
just
not
hold on
wasting
to
them.
them.
I mean, he's wasting them, but
he's
he's not
wasting them.
He's not
Right.
wasting them carrying them.
Yeah.
Right. He uses them all.
He does use them.
I found the bit on the Hasford Kubrick thing I was looking for. So Michael Herr wrote a book about Kubrick.
Dispatches. Oh, about Kubrick. Oh, sorry. Sure. Yeah.
And this is his
Called My Buddy Stan. No, I think it was called
Kubrick by
right?
Her.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll just read this verbatim. Hasford was, by her own description, a scary man. This is a Guardian piece when the book was coming out, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Hasford was, by her own description, a scary man, a big haunted Marine whom Kubrick was determined to meet. I advised him against it, recalls her. I told Stanley I didn't think they'd get on. Kubrick insisted. Hasford duly came over to Britain, and there was a dinner during which Kubrick passed her a note saying, I can't deal with this man. From then on, Hasford was dismissed from the Mastro's presence.
I can't. I know.
Kubrick does just seem like the fussiest little fella sometimes.
It's just so funny.
He can't even say it. He has to pass a note.
Stanley, this guy's an intense Marine. You're not going to like him. Don't tell me who I'm going to fucking like. Invite him over for dinner. Comes over for dinner. Immediately writes a note. Please get rid of this guy.
Did you guys read the making of Space Odyssey? That book. It's
No,
fucking
we
awesome and has a lot of like perspective on Kubrick. It's really fucking you're like, you hear a lot of these weird fickle things where he's like, well, get back in the ape suit, you know, and like like guys are like fainting and shit. Like his energy towards everyone is so, and even just hearing reading snippets of interviews from D'Onofrio and Joker and Modine and all that, you're like, man, it must have been one of those things where if you didn't know in the moment, like you would be like, I fucking hate this guy. Like it would be so easy to hate Kubrick if you if you don't have the zoom, if you don't have the vision, which I wouldn't have had if I was cast in Full Metal Jacket.
But I think even if you do have the vision, like Modine, you know, who so much of his life since this movie has been defined by this movie, and continuing to talk about this movie, releasing his diaries on it.
App.
Yes, exactly. He has that attitude. I feel like Malcolm McDowell talks about the same way, where it's just like, I knew this guy was a genius. I put myself in his hands. I submitted myself to the process, you know?
Yeah.
But even if you do have that perspective, I do think it takes a certain kind of person to be able to like detach in that way while also staying invested in your work. Even if you go into this being like, it's Kubrick, he's a genius, by day 200, you're probably like, I don't fucking care. There's no, you know? Like the two casting stories on this movie I find really interesting. The sort of almost stories are that he really wanted Anthony Michael Hall to play Joker.
Sure. Yeah. Okay.
That was his first
That's
choice.
Cool.
He saw 16 Candles. He was like, this guy's an incredible actor, which I think he's right about.
I think he's right. I think he's right. With hindsight, I think they crushed it with Modine.
I think Modine works well.
Modine's incredible in this movie.
It's one of those things where
performance.
you wish there just had been a Anthony Michael Hall Kubrick collaboration, especially if Kubrick did recognize in him that thing. And it's like the soft era of Anthony Michael Hall before he overcorrects and feels like he needs to be a tough guy to prove that he's not a dork anymore for the remaining 40 years of his career.
So swole.
But he is like incredible in those Hughes movies. And you're like,
he's good.
No one else really kind of got how to use him in that era. But there were like 8 months of negotiations until it finally broke down. And it's always very unclear. And when Anthony Michael Hall does interviews about it, they're like, did you ask for too much money? Was it like a creative thing? Was it like the length of shoot? And he's always kind of like vague about what it was. But you can almost imagine just his reps at the time being like, Anthony is making like hand over foot being the nerd in these comedies that we can shoot 4 of a year.
Yeah, and we've got 12 offers taking us through the mid 80s, where it ends with you having 6 homes. Anthony Michael Hall. How do you feel? Like, you know,
we hand him
and
over
it's
to
like,
this guy. Like, who knows what comes of it?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, he was like 18 years old as well. Like, I mean, he would have been striking in that movie in his way.
He would have been. The other one is Rico Ross, who plays Frost in Aliens. Was an American actor who went to England because he felt like in America and Hollywood he was only getting offers to play gang members. So he like went to England, went to drama school, and became like an American actor that English productions could use, and then mostly became kind of a military guy instead. He got offered a part in this. I don't know which character he was supposed to play.
I guess would be Payback or not Payback.
Hardball, is that what his character's name is?
8-Ball, unfortunately.
8-Ball. It's not that character. The character name I saw was a different one who I don't know if the character was mostly cut out or the role is so small I didn't observe it. I want to say like Cleveland is who he was supposed to play. But he got offered the part, and then he got offered the part in Aliens. And it was like this coin toss thing for him. It came down to Kubrick had an 8-week hold on him, and there was 1 week of overlap between Aliens and Full Metal Jacket, and they were trying to negotiate the two. And eventually it was just like, you're dealing with 2 different tyrannical control freaks. Neither one is going to give an inch to the other one. You have to pick one. He picks Aliens, and he was
coin. Imagine having a coin toss in your life where it's like, which iconic film do you want to be a part of? Which iconic film directed by someone who is a proven master would you like to be in?
But
ideally,
also,
both.
Like,
it's like
a lunatic. It's going to be like an incredibly difficult production. But the thing was, Kubrick was like, we can't give you up a week early, but we need 8 weeks. And then he said that when Aliens came out in theaters in 86, Full Metal Jacket was still filming.
Right.
It was one of those
course.
things where it was like he thought he could do both, maybe. And
well,
he
it's
went
like,
through.
It's legendary that like Modine got engaged, married, pregnant, and had their kid, and like celebrated the kid's first birthday, all while shooting Full Metal Jacket.
Yeah, it was like 2 years, right? I mean, another crazy stat I saw was that Arlie Ermey got in a really bad car accident and couldn't
Yes.
film anything for 4.5 months, but it happened at the point in production where they had filmed everything but Arlie Ermey's footage.
Yeah, he got hurt like after they shot Vietnam. Like,
Yeah.
he's like,
It massively delayed production. Yes, he also it's crazy that he survived that. Apparently, like he should have died.
he kept himself alive, like flashing brights in the Jeep. Like in the
Yes,
at the account
yes.
I read, he's just like
Yes.
turned over on the side of the road, broken ribs and broken arm or whatever, and he's just flashing the brights on his car, trying to stay away on the Jeep,
Right,
staying
like
awake.
broken ribs
Correct.
puncturing organs.
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In Epping Forest, which is not like a place that anyone is in the
Yeah.
nighttime. Like that's
Well, what the fuck was he doing out there? We don't even have to get into that.
But I think you were about to say that's why he like doesn't move his arm in the movie.
Yeah, there's like a whole chunk where he's not moving one of his arms. And I mean, it plays into the character because he doesn't really move a lot. Like without the exception of walking and jog. Man, talk about this long ass production. What if you're not Arliss Howard, Matthew Modine, or Vincent D'Onofrio? You are fucking guy number 10 who's just got to do push-ups and jog
But that's
all
the
day
thing.
long.
I think that's
God.
basically what
God.
Rico Ross's thing was gonna be. I mean,
Yeah.
my understanding is Rico Ross auditioned for like Drake in Aliens.
Yeah.
And then they cast the other guy, and they were like, "We'd like you to play one of the Marines." And he's like, "I got an offer from Kubrick." And Cameron was like, "I will promise you have dialogue in this."
Right.
He's like, "I will create Frost. I will give you the Arturian poontang joke. I will give you beats.
Another
I
poontang.
assure you, you will not
Yeah.
just be the guy in the background." But yeah, these guys just had to fucking be here for 18 months or whatever.
Well, but also, come on. I mean, like, just think about how he hasn't made a movie in 7 years.
Yeah.
And it's like, hey, Stanley Kubrick is making a war movie. It's like, oh shit, a war movie. He's made war movies before. And he needs like every, young actor below the age of 28 to like everyone must have wanted to be in Full Metal Jacket, right? It must have been one of those things where it's like, holy shit, you only get so many bites at that apple.
This was an early case of letting people submit auditions through videotape, like having a pretty open audition because they needed
Right.
young people, and they got 3,000 submissions.
Which
Yeah.
this created one of my favorite early viral videos. Is that dude? And I'll send it to you guys if you haven't seen it or don't remember it. It's a dude's audition tape for Full Metal Jacket, and he's like at a Sears, like with a ladder, and his like leg is up on it. And he's like, "Hello, Mr. Kubrick." It's like how it begins, and then he like talks about all his acting training, and it's like pure like unsheathed like actor ego stuff, and it was
Yeah.
just I remember watching it in like 07 and everyone just like cackling about it. So I'll track
Wow.
it down. Hello, Mr. Kubrick.
Yeah, you also have to think like at this point, the Leon Vitali stuff has sort of already happened. So any young actor is viewing this partially as like, this is an education,
Right.
Like, it's not just that I want this opportunity as an actor. I understand that what I'm signing up
Yeah.
for here is the idea of like studying under this guy.
Leon Vitali is like filmmaker or whatever that documentary is about.
Yeah,
him.
film
Like,
worker. Yeah.
film
who-
worker. I
right.
fucking love that. That
Right.
was so good.
Who plays like Barry Lyndon's stepson and was like a young actor who then gave up his entire acting career to be Stanley Kubrick's executive assistant for the rest of his life, was just like, I'm so enamored of this man's process. I just want to serve him.
This man, that's a fucking the sign of a true artist. Like, all right, I completely switched mediums to just like
Right.
just to be around talent, just to be
Yes.
around genius. Like, it's so
Right.
fucking crazy.
Right. I think Modine talks about this movie that way too. Not that he wasn't like in it as an actor, but that it was like, well, the main thing was me studying Stanley Kubrick for 2 years.
Right. So fucking cool.
Yeah, it's probably pretty cool. I mean, probably a good time. I don't know. I mean, I have a lot of stories. I mean, he's sitting there, he's playing chess. He's still Stanley Kubrick. He's the same, grumpy genius.
Griffin, do you think it was a union, like a SAG movie? Because this is what I was thinking the whole time about it going over. Is like,
Yeah.
these guys, they're getting a fucking weekly rate for 2 years. Is sad. Like, and I get a lot of these people have other movement in their
Sure.
career, but for me, if I accidentally got locked off in London for 2 years working on a war movie, I think it would be the best thing that's happened to my career.
Oh,
You'd be in great shape.
Yeah, I mean,
absolutely.
Running around.
a lot of jogging.
No, because I know that's the reason that Lucas kept filming in London for as long as he could.
Yeah, he probably does not have to abide
The-
by
the unions-
SAG
Yeah.
rules,
I
but
just
who
know
knows?
people were
Yeah.
like crazy underpaid on the Star Wars movies up through like Phantom Menace, and that the unions are more fungible there, at least were at this point in time.
Yoda was living out of his car. It's
Yeah.
crazy.
I also think there's a difference between if like someone comes to you and they're like, you booked a movie, you are guaranteed 2 years of work, and you're like, hell yeah, here we go, steady paycheck, versus like
Right.
the Rico Ross story is so telling that they're like, oh, we'll shoot you out in 8 weeks.
Right.
You know,
And he-
that no one here thought they were signing up for this long.
And if you're saying someone's going to be shot out in 8 weeks, there's 2 halves to the movie that are, or 3 parts to the movie where
Right.
it's 3 fully different casts. Like Joker jumps around. First and third has Joker and Cowboy.
Yeah.
The middle one has Joker and Rafterman. The third one, Rafterman's in 2 and 3. But
But
If
you're
you-
right. It mostly switches up. Yeah.
so if you were like, if you're stuck there for 2 years and you're in 1/3 of the movie, that's also
Yeah.
crazy too.
Yeah, and it's like he's already had several movies run this long, and yet he, by all accounts, is still going into it being like, no, we're going to do like a normal shoot.
Yeah, right.
None of that Kubrick shit.
This war movie of mine. Okay. Let me give you more context here. I like this quote. I like Kubrick talking. Ooh, you can hear kind of the exasperated sigh. If I'm forced to suggest something about the deeper meaning of the story, I would have to say that it has a lot to do with the Jungian idea of the duality of man, altruism and cooperation on one hand, aggression and xenophobia on the other. So I guess this is his thing. He's like, I don't want to make a war movie about good and evil. I want to make it about good and evil, right? In the same person, right? Rather than like good guys versus
the
bad
interplay
guys or
between
anything
the
like that.
two. Yeah.
Right.
The line when I think it's 8 Ball, who Animal Mother is very racist towards the entire section of that movie,
Mhm.
but 8 Ball is the one who defends Animal Mother to Joker and says, when shit hits the fan, that's the guy you want. And that's like a weird duality of man moment too. It's like this guy, legendary piece of shit, actually treats me personally awful, but I now need to hold 2 thoughts about this person in my head because he is good and may be the reason I stay alive, and does later try to save him to the detriment of the rest of his platoon. But
Yeah.
but
Yes.
there is something about like every single person, like even Pyle is bad. Everyone hates him, and he's bad at everything except shooting. And and so all of a sudden, Drill Sergeant's like, "Hey, okay, this, maybe there's a side of this guy I like." And we see that so frequently throughout. And like, obviously, there's a straight up monologue about the Jungian duality of man, which
Yes.
which fucking rules as well. Just randomly dropped in the middle of the movie, a fucking intense backdrop of like bodies under lie and fucking the monologue about the theme of the movie happening in the foreground. Fucking great moment, which I never really hit me before. I always thought the peace thing was funny, and now on this viewing, I'm like, fuck, that's heavy.
we just recorded the episode this week, and I know, Gabrus, you've seen this movie as well. So, I mean, I'm just putting these 2 films together because I've seen them within the same 7 days. But it's the thing that, like, Woman King goes into a lot as well, of, like, how much you have to break your brain to survive in an environment like this, right? Like, the Pyle suicide is, like, shocking, but then it's almost more shocking that more people don't kill themselves in this environment. The way this film
Why
depicts...
would anyone like this?
Right.
Yes.
Like, thriving in this environment is a weird human failure as well. Like, it's like there's something like, if you did well at Paris Island, that's like a bad sign as much as killing yourself.
Well, but that's why Joker is such a fascinating character.
Yeah.
Like, Joker is clearly smart, right? And
Mhm.
he is clearly an intellectual, And we don't know that because he says anything in the first chunk of the movie except for that he doesn't believe in God, right? Except for that moment. But like, you just know it because it's Matthew Modine and you can just tell. And he seems to be able to let the basic training just kind of pass through him, like, for whatever reason. Like, he's just turning off his brain and he's just like, okay, fine, I'll just do whatever this guy tells me to do. And emerge on the other side of a capable journalist of sorts. Like, and then that's how he's perceiving Vietnam for so much of it. He's just sort of like, yeah, I don't know. I don't think this is good, but also I'm unmoved by it in a weird way.
Well, I would assume,
which is very powerful to watch.
He got drafted. He's like there against his will. A lot of people were there against their will. So him choosing to be a journalist is also like, I am not going to die on the front lines if I can prevent it.
But he's not like, oh my God, this is horrible. He's watching it just somewhat dispassionately for most of the movie.
And it's the whole having the peace sign button and Born to Kill on the helmet, you know? And the more he's pressed on it, the more he's like, I don't know. I mean, what you're saying, Gabrus, of just like Animal Mother is the example of someone who is built to succeed within this system. And the takeaway is
it's bad.
This guy's terrifying. But also the guy he's most racist to is like, I mean, in this environment, he kind of needs to be my best friend.
I mean, one of my favorite war movies is Black Hawk Down. Ridley Scott's Black Hawk Down. And yes, incredible movie. I've seen it a million times. And Eric Bana's character is sort of similar, where everyone's like, look, that guy freaks me out, but he's very helpful when a million people are shooting guns because he seems to be really suited to that atmosphere. That is when that guy locks the fuck down and starts doing stuff that I'm too afraid to do.
What's the thing they say when they're worried about the guys being mentally unbalanced? Class 8 or whatever they say.
You talking about the guy who jerks off too much?
But they say this.
They have the story about the guy who jerks off 10 times a day.
His named hand job.
No, they say this about Pyle too, though. Early on in the movie, when he's like, I caught him talking to his gun, right?
Right.
It's this thing of like how funny it is to frame anyone as like, oh, this guy might.
It is Section 8.
Okay.
So it's both public housing and psychiatric discharge in the Marines. But yeah, they say, sorry, go on, Griff.
No, it is that thing where you're just like, well, but the entire exercise of boot camp is essentially trying to break people's brains, right?
Sure. We are going to remove your personhood.
And to rebuild them. Them in the in what we need in a soldier.
Right. And then the people who acquit themselves best in this environment are the people who seem to be perhaps a little deranged going into it, that their temperament is already a better fit to this, where there's less rewiring.
Chicken or egg, like like if that person was just drafted into the Peace Corps, would they end up being like, close to God, like godly? You know what I mean?
It's just
like,
funny
what
to
if,
be
what
like.
If they did the Peace Corps the same way, though? That'd be funny. If they had Ermey screams at you, "You maggots! You're gonna build houses all over the world."
I've said before, and I don't know anything about the actual, but there should be like a non-military service you could join.
Yeah.
That has all the same perks as the military, but you go like they send you to Wyoming to help put solar panels in or whatever, and it's service. You get like some home loan benefits, you get some college payoff benefits. It's like it's a way for poor people to get out without having to murder on behalf of imperialism.
Right, that's the thing we're really looking for. Yeah,
it's like that's the shit that needs to come around, is that you get sent to like, like, all right, now everyone, we're going to Bozeman and we're gonna get water to the native people. Like
yes. I just find it funny that it's like the Section 8 threat looming of like, this guy jerks off too much, he might be a problem. Pyle's talking to his gun. Animal Mother, that's a good soldier. And you're like, no, you've like made him the right kind of crazy versus the kind of crazy that scares them,
Apparently the Animal Mother backstory is that he was like a criminal who got like, it's not in the movie, but he was a criminal who got arrested and was like jail.
The classic jailer army choice was and this is a big thing in the inspection, which is just on my mind because I just saw it. But the way you can't say you have to say this Marine, right?
Sure.
You're literally not allowed to be individualistic. Mm-hmm. This Marine needs information. is how you ask a question, essentially, which I love. What a crazy thing to train people to shoot guns at other people.
Insane. There's the moment that I find so fascinating where I forget what the thing is that they're fighting over, but where Ermey calls Modine out, and Modine refuses to like change his opinion and says like, "Sir, I think you'll respect this Marine less."
Do you believe in God?
Oh yes,
yeah.
it's yes.
And he's like, this Marine believes that drill sergeant will be unhappy with whatever answer for cowardice of changing the answer or whatever. Like, and that's when he gets promoted to squad leader.
Right, and that's the thing where Ermey does not warm up at all, but it's the only time he respects anyone the entire movie, where he has to call over other guys and go like, "You've just been demoted. I think this guy's a piece of shit, but he's got fucking integrity. And he's got balls."
One other time we see the drill sergeant supportive, and it's when Pyle is hitting targets.
Oh, sure.
It's the only other, which is very distinctive in that
he's like, good job.
Yeah, it's the only two times. It's like when he's like, "Oh, this big dumb idiot I'm saddled with at least could maybe be a killer," and I'm happy for that. Unbeknownst to who he may end up killing in the next couple of days.
I mean, just the dynamics of that Joker Ermey scene are so fascinating to me, because it's like this entire operation is designed to knock all individuality out of these fucking guys, right? And to just like turn them into weapons. This thing we talked about a lot in the Woman King episode, where it's just like your job is just to hone every single part of your being into being the most efficient weapon possible. And yet it's like Modine is displaying the kind of intelligence he knows is of value within a battlefield.
Yeah.
He can't actively encourage it.
Right.
But it's like, oh, this guy has some level of strategic thinking that is good, even though he's going against what I'm asking him to do.
But he's not exactly going against what the drill sergeant taught him. He's playing within the rules of the Marines, but keeping his opinion. So that's like a very specific needle thread that he does that I don't think in that moment the drill sergeant Ermey is even didn't think of that as a possible answer.
But it's
and when he
essentially
says that, it's like, oh, fuck. Okay, tough guy. You're right. Hey, and he's like, you got me.
You beat my. I'm the Sphinx. You beat my logic puzzle, and it's like this guy's got upper management potential. Like that's essentially what he's recognizing.
So Kubrick considered a number of actors to play Gunner Sergeant Hartman. Robert De Niro, which is interesting to imagine. Ed Harris, who probably would be good.
Yes.
But had just decided to take a year off of acting because he had made a little film called The Abyss, which broke his brain into a million pieces.
Life's abyss, and then you die.
Exactly. R. Lee Ermey had been a technical advisor in Apocalypse Now, Purple Hearts, Boys and Company C, a lot of these Vietnam movies. He was working at a factory as a quality controller. I'm sure he was very chill. So he was like a very fun coworker. And he was brought along to interviews with these British soldiers, and the stuff he would scream in their faces. Kubrick was like, all right, you should. Apparently he initially thought he wouldn't be vicious enough, but then realized, no, obviously this guy is perfect, and would write down everything he said because all the insults came right from him. All these elaborate essay length sort of treatises on what a piece of shit somebody was. Like it is like improv, like you guys are saying. Like it's like this incredible, there's no way he's writing this stuff down, right? He just has some sort of ability to generate streams
that having
of insults.
Been said, there is the misconception that his monologues in this movie are improvised, which belies that's not how film production works. They would just be like, Arlie, give us a run. And like Leon Vitali would be there like a fucking stenographer.
And like riffing and rehearse, like it's rehearsals, and it's like just go. And also, I think a lot of it was in like test footage. There's like this legend that there's this video of Arlie Ermey that Kubrick saw of him rattling off all these like insults and scream while being like pelted with tennis balls and oranges and never breaking. And then something to the effect of like someone transcribed it and it's 3 minutes of video, but it's like 70 pages of writing or something. Like there's like all these legends of like what the output he was putting out, and you believe it. You saying it, Griffin, I had never heard that, but I believe if you look at Arlie Ermey or interact with him when he's not fully in Hartman mode, you're going, I don't know. This guy seems kind of like cute and nice, right? Like,
Gabrus, that story is even wilder than what you heard. They hired first this guy, Tim Colseri, who ends up playing the door gunner in this movie, the Get
you
Some
don't
guy.
need him as much.
Get some.
Right.
Yeah, God, that line is very chilling.
Yes.
So he was supposed to play Hartman, right? And Ermey was mostly supposed to be a technical consultant. He starts doing all these riffs. They're like, fuck, we should just do this. But his whole fear was that he was going to like clam up on camera. Aside from not being vicious enough, it's like, well, the fact that you have this background doesn't mean it will play on screen.
Right.
You know, things don't translate. So like they would do these sessions where Liam Vitale was the one who was pelting him with oranges. Or they'd be like, we're going to film you. You have to do all your dialogue while playing soccer. Like they'd essentially say, the one I heard about the oranges thing was that Liam Vitale was pelting him with oranges and he had to catch each one and throw it back without missing a word of his dialogue. And if he either dropped an orange or fucked up a line, they had to start over again from the beginning. And Kubrick was like, he can't shoot until he's able to do the whole thing perfectly. Like he wanted to make sure this guy who didn't have a lot of on-camera experience would not get not only stage fright, but would be able to like withstand the technical demands of the thing. So they just made him run his dialogue while playing sports and shit.
And allegedly, Colseri, the door gunner guy who was maybe going to play Hartman at first, had spent like 6 weeks getting off book on all the crazy monologues too, and then had his role changed. Oh, that's a fucking ball buster.
It sucked. I mean, look, at least they give him like a good moment. Like he has an iconic moment in the film. It is funny to imagine. You hear all these stories of like Kubrick calling cut and being like, Arlie, what is a reach around?
Right.
And then Arlie explaining it, and then Kubrick going, good, leave that in.
Well, sir.
but also like the Arlie Ermey stuff is apparently like 2-3 takes. Like this was where Kubrick was like, he was so precise.
Yes.
We actually didn't have to do it the normal amount.
Right.
Yeah.
This is a Kubrick quote that I like. Acting is an amazing, part crazy, part magical gift. An actor's power rests in the ability to create emotion in himself and thus in the audience. The ability to cry at the clack of a clapboard is a strange and rare talent. Of course, drill instructors can do it naturally because they're performers, and liars can do it because lying is important to the liar. But basically, he was just like, I guess realized like you are an actor already.
Right.
Like I hadn't considered this, but what you're doing is acting. And Ermey basically said like what he thought was realistic about Full Metal Jacket, which is what I just remarked on. Actually, I hadn't put this together. Is that no one's talking? Everyone is just silent.
Yeah.
And he says most films about boot camp have too much gabbing. That's why they're unreal.
Right, because they wouldn't be like. They would be scared.
You got to be quiet.
Yeah.
The other guy's fucking talking. He's in charge of you. Shut up. Don't speak. He will cram you into your locker.
And that's our introduction to Joker, Private. Like we get like
right.
Joker chatting is when we learn the rule. Like we learn the rules of like he's the weird one, he's the intellectual, he's making a wisecrack here, and Arlie Ermey's about to kill him for it. He becomes Joker in. That's the other thing about this movie. This movie fucking starts.
Yeah.
Oh,
this
sure
movie
does.
just fucking starts, dude.
Yeah.
I paused it at 1 minute and 21 seconds. You're in the barracks.
Yeah.
And
he's calling them maggots.
yes, at 19, at 9 seconds, their heads are being shaved. It's like MGM into head shaving. You're just fucking plowed into it. Sorry, go, David.
I was watching this with friend of the show, Emma Stefanski, and we were just like, wouldn't that be satisfying to be the guy who shaves everyone's head? It just looks satisfying to just get all the hair off. Doesn't it, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't it seem good?
Activate some OCD and shit.
The floor's a little gross.
Oh,
The floor is a little
Floor
gross.
sucks.
No.
Yeah.
I guess you need another guy dealing with the floor. You wanna get that, but I don't
the
know,
thing
man.
I read is that obviously when they were filming, they had to shave the guys' heads every single day. Like you shave it again every single day for continuity. The opening of all of their heads being shaved was shot like 4 months after they thought they had wrapped. He brought them back and was like, "I need a new opening." So everyone had grown their hair out. And
that's allegedly why everyone is miserable.
Exactly.
It sells how
they look
miserable
really sad
because they genuinely thought they were out of this thing. They thought they were finally done. And he's like, one last reshoot.
Oh, God. What a fucking monster.
David?
Yeah.
I don't know if you know this. Before Quentin Tarantino and Roger Avery made movies like Pulp Fiction, a film they co-wrote together to Oscar-winning success.
Yep.
Changed the culture.
Roger famously said he had to pee at the Oscars.
They worked at a Southern California video rental store called Video Archives.
Yes, they did.
And David, after that store closed, Quentin Tarantino, now a very successful filmmaker, purchased the entire collection of VHS tapes. Decades later, now, present day, he and Roger have teamed up on a new podcast.
So, a real fantasy of mine, having like an entire video store in your basement. So cool.
I mean, are you kidding me?
I know. Yes.
David, you and I, this is true. We're texting about Video Archives last night.
I love this podcast.
We both love it, unsurprisingly.
Let me give you, on the Video Archives podcast, Quentin and Roger and their announcer, Gala Avery.
Yes.
Shout out Gala.
Who rules.
Stan. Travel back in time. They revisit old classics. They discover new favorites. They're pulling VHS tapes down that they used to recommend to customers.
It's basically, it feels like two guys on a shift picking 3 random movies to cover their 8 hours on the clock and then just comparing them.
Usually there's kind of a fun progression to them where it's sort of like kind of a studio movie, kind of a junkier studio movie, and then like a real like sort of grindhouse or...
They fit into these boxes, but they're kind of random pairings. Other than, I mean, recently they did a 2-part themed episode around American Giallo. The show's so good.
It is really good.
We were just texting about all the different things we loved in recent episodes.
And I love what they say about the movies, but I also just love how they talk about like the video boxes and the transfer and
their
the quality
love
of
the culture around home video.
And they've covered some blank check films: Dark Star, The Keep, Moonraker, Mikey and Nikki, which worth listening to because they have interesting insights from Elaine May herself in that episode. Not to spoil
it, but he gets some direct source stuff that is fascinating.
Very cool. The American Giallo movies episodes they just did with
Eli
Roth are really, really good. And you can browse the shelves and listen to and follow the Video Archives podcast with Quentin Tarantino and Roger Avery now wherever you get your podcasts.
They're kind of the original two friends.
They are.
I'll say it.
So, Griff, obviously, Arlie Ermey was not nominated for an Oscar for this
I was
film,
just about to
which
talk
I would
about
say
this, yeah.
a surprising snub. Now, I have 2 things to say about it. One, we're going to talk about that category briefly. I just wanted to, because it is loaded as fuck.
Okay.
You can see why he didn't get the nomination.
Yeah.
2, and I hadn't thought about this. Lou Gossett Jr. had just won an Oscar a couple years
Officer
earlier.
and a
Gentleman. So maybe it was kind of like, Drill Sergeant, we've seen that. Even though obviously this is a more realistic, this is not like a bigger character. Do you want to know who the 5 nominees were, Griffin?
Yeah, I just want to say 2 other points there. One, I think there was a little bit of D'Onofrio-Ermey split. I mean, Ermey got a Golden Globe nomination, and I think...
Ermey got a Golden Globe nomination.
And he got... I was looking at this here. Hold on. He won a Critics Award, but D'Onofrio won a different one. Ermey won Boston Society of Film Critics.
Sure.
And then...
Solid.
D'Onofrio was nominated by New York.
Sure.
But... There's also just the thing, I feel like actors are at a real disadvantage if their part is front-loaded in a movie. Like, if you look at supporting winners, very often they are people who end the film more than they are people who are at the opening section.
This is one of the 10 most iconic screen performances in history.
Agree.
Right?
Yeah, it's one of those situations where, like, no one could know at the time that how iconic this role, like, you know what I mean? But if you're like acting wise, you're like, oh, this guy's just screaming at people and it's the first half of the movie. And he doesn't have a clip. He doesn't have an Oscar clip.
Sure.
And also it's like it was his job. So like he's just being himself,
but
right? Like was possibly
it's also just odd to me because I feel like in the 80s, I mean, they're like wins like Hayang S. Nagore for like The Killing Fields, where it's like, oh, this guy wasn't even really an actor. And there are also things like like Round Midnight and like Baryshnikov getting nominated and stuff like that, where it's like sometimes you have someone whose acting isn't their main thing. But there's this incredible film document of their work,
Right, and it's a fun nom. I like those noms.
Yeah.
They're usually like fun but here are the 5.
Okay, give me the 5.
Okay. The Oscar went to Sean Connery for The Untouchables.
Oh,
a sort of combo career win and big meaty role, right?
Just like a Dago to bring a knife to a gunfight. Sorry. Gotta do
what he says.
The one slur I'm allowed to do.
The one you get the pass on.
And then you've got, I mean, Griffin. I want to. It is category fraud, but one of your favorite performances ever, I would say. Albert Brooks in Broadcast News.
Oh, yeah, I disagree on it being category fraud, maybe, but that's a tough one.
I'm not sure how I feel. It's sort of it's kind of a 3-lead movie. He's sort of a lead, sort of supporting.
It's one of those things. The part that's weird is that he's supporting and Hurt is lead. You feel like either they're both lead or they're both supporting, but
exactly.
Yeah.
But obviously, for politics' sake,
Sure.
they put the marquee idol as
Yes.
the lead and him as the supporting actor. Anyway, certainly deserves a nomination. Then you have Vincent Gardenia in Moonstruck. Now, this is maybe the most vulnerable of these 5 picks.
Sure, but your favorite movie.
I love that performance.
Yeah.
And he's also kind of there for like all the fucking guys in Moonstruck. Danny Aiello, John Mahoney.
Yeah.
Nicolas Cage is kind of the lead, obviously. But like, there's just a lot of big, watery-eyed Italian guys in that movie who we love, right?
Sure. You're saying he's nominated on behalf of the cast.
Yes.
The over
he's there
50
for them.
cast. Yeah.
And then the other 2 nominees are iconic actors getting their first nominations. So Denzel Washington in Cry Freedom and Morgan Freeman in Street Smart.
Huh. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, where it's like those actors actually both went on to do better work, although those are both good performances. But like at the time, it's like, well, holy shit.
Welcome to the club nominations. Yeah.
Right.
Right.
And the Golden Globes are very different. It's Connery and Morgan Freeman, but then they have Richard Dreyfuss in Nuts.
Oh boy.
And Rob Lowe in Square Dance. And then Arlie Ermey. So it's a weird bunch.
4 of the movies you've mentioned in the last minute, I have not even heard of. Like,
which have you not heard of?
Cry Freedom, the one Morgan Freeman was nominated for.
Street Smart.
And then what?
Cry Freedom.
And then what was the last one you just said?
It was Square Dance.
Square Dance.
Square Dance and Nuts.
The fuck is that? Yeah.
Well, so Nuts is the movie where Barbra Streisand goes nuts.
It's got a great poster.
It does. She looks real nuts
She
on
does.
it. I gotta tell you.
Yeah.
I think it's a movie about her trying to be declared mentally incompetent in some kind of a murder trial. It's like a very serious movie. Street Smart is this like Christopher Reeve goes. He's a reporter who goes undercover in like the world of hustling, and Morgan Freeman plays a pimp called Fast Black Smalls. Who's like taking him around Times Square in the 80s, and obviously like he's the thing that is good about that movie. I think it's a Jerry Schatzberg movie.
Cry Freedom and Street Smart both sort of have that thing of like, here's a vehicle for a beloved leading man, and then the supporting guy just completely steals the movie, right? Like Denzel stealing Cry Freedom from Kevin Kline. And like that was supposed to be Christopher Reeve doing like, I'm going to go a little darker. I'm going to move away from Superman. And everyone was like, we only want to talk about Morgan Freeman. No one is paying attention to what you're doing in this movie.
Now, I have never seen Square Dance. It is from Daniel Petrie, who directed a zillion movies like back in the day. But I don't really know anything about it. I think it's set in Texas. Winona Ryder.
Jason Robards, Jane Alexander, coming of age drama.
I think Rory, Rob Lowe plays a character called Rory, who I think like has an intellectual disability.
Oh, great.
So I'm not sure how that plays today.
Yeah.
But I could see that being the kind of thing where in the 80s they were like,
Oh, my
Rob,
God.
good job, very brave performance or whatever. Maybe it's good, but I doubt it.
My guess
somehow.
is no.
Yeah.
I'm just going to go on a
So
limb
that's the
here.
vibe.
Yeah.
But so it's kind of it is a stacked year, but Arlie Ermey is good in this movie, as you say, Griff, Vincent D'Onofrio.
Yeah, I'd say it's pretty great. I think they might have split. I think the first half of the movie thing. Like I was thinking about Mark Rylance, Bridge of Spies, right? Like an incredible performance, and similarly a thing where he just kind of owns the first 45 minutes of the movie. I'm like, I don't know if he wins.
Stallone. Should have been Stallone for that one.
Wow.
I will fight that. I think that should have been Stallone.
The Stallone performance in Creed is incredible.
But my point is just,
arguably one of his only good ones in his entire career.
Yeah.
We could have definitely just hooked him up at that point.
He wouldn't be doing Samaritan now. But if Rylance doesn't come back at the end of Bridge of Spies, I don't know if he wins the Oscar. You know what I'm saying? Like the fact that he comes back at the end for like 5 minutes after being missing for like an hour.
Yeah, you're right. He gets the one knockout punch at the end,
right?
Just so you don't forget about him.
So you don't forget.
I get that.
It's not like
Do you think Ermey should come back in this movie and be like, "You guys are good now.
Yeah.
Great job, everybody."
If he showed up in the clouds and just started yelling, that would rule.
I've whipped heaven into shape. St. Peter's a maggot.
That would be good. That would be good. That's what they should do.
You know what's a funny use of R. Lee Ermey? I mean, it's what we're talking about, but he plays the ghost version of this in The Frighteners.
That's funny. Yes, that's right.
He plays like spooky ghost drill sergeant.
We should do Peter Jackson.
Yeah,
I want to rewatch The Frighteners. I haven't seen that since I was like 12 years old.
Yeah, ripped.
Yeah, I remember it ripping. Vincent D'Onofrio, as we said, he was a bouncer, right, at the Hard Rock Cafe, I think.
My favorite fact. I've been dying to like throw that out, but yeah.
Sorry, Ben. Sorry.
It's okay.
Throw it out. And he taped the audition himself and mailed it to all the way to Stanley in England, and then put on something like 70 pounds, right? Like he put on an incredible amount of weight.
Modine was the one who tipped him off. They were buddies.
Right. Yes.
And Modine had already gotten the part and was like, you really should get your name in the mix for this. And yeah, I mean, it's one of these things that's like hard to verify, but it has long stood as like the claim of the most weight an actor has gained for a role.
Sure.
There was sort of the victory lap of like he gained 10 more pounds than De Niro in Raging Bull. It also speaks to just like he's got a very different body type. You know?
I mean, D'Onofrio is like 7 inches taller than De Niro or something crazy like that.
Yes.
Right.
De Niro's very short.
It lends Pyle's size in this movie. I really like I was saying earlier, I got really connected to the journalism section in the middle because I felt the most seen. Like I was like, oh, this would be like my energy there. But the fucking Pyle, his size makes him so sympathetic and scary at the same time.
And the shaved head. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like all together, he has this giant evil baby look, which just works so powerfully for the role of Lawrence or of Pyle, where you're like, I want to help this guy, but also I don't want this guy anywhere fucking near me.
D'Onofrio talks about he said that when he was filming this movie for whatever 16 years of his life, where he had to maintain this look, that people would talk to him more slowly.
Right.
I believe it.
That just with this size and this shaved head, and when he's still got the sort of baby face thing, there is that odd quality of something about him seeming simultaneously very, very innocent and deeply cursed and deranged at the same time. It's also wild to be like, when does Adventures in Babysitting come out?
Adventures in Babysitting is 1987, same year.
Okay. So same year as this, who knows,
probably
shooting
shot
schedules.
like 2 years later or whatever. Right. Yeah.
But for those who have not seen it or have not seen it recently, the bit in Adventures of Babysitting is he is like a guy who works at a parking lot, but the little girl in that movie is obsessed with Thor, Marvel's Thor, and she thinks he looks like Thor. And it's D'Onofrio as like presented as the ultimate beefcake. Here is like a golden god, D'Onofrio with long blonde hair, ripped. It's wild how like fundamentally different he feels in these two films. And it's not just a difference of 70 pounds. It's like his aura is different.
Yeah. Fuck. He's really a great like this is one of those movies, one of those moments I think I talk about every time I'm on this podcast, and I think I even already said it this time. This is one of those movies where you're like, that's why this guy worked forever. You know what I mean? You're like, he does some great work down the road too, but nothing that you're like, Men in Black is maybe his second best role behind Pyle. It's, like when you're growing up, you're like, this guy's in everything and he's just like fine. And then when you're like, oh, I see, like, I always think about that. The Sopranos will do that to you, or The Wire will do that to you. When you like rewatch those shows, you're like, now I know why everyone likes this guy. He like did this cool thing. Like if you're coming onto someone's career late and then catch one of their early roles, it really explains everything to you.
Absolutely. I mean, the thing is, like, D'Onofrio has done a tremendous amount of great work over decades, as we've said. But this is truly one of those lifetime pass performances.
Yes,
and you even feel it where it's like he's gone through varying levels of like bankability. But he never stops working because it's just like, well, everyone knows he's got this in him. Isn't this insane, Ben? I just sent you the picture.
Hot.
Right?
Damn. Yeah.
But like,
it's really surprising.
You just don't think that D'Onofrio could be positioned in the same category as Chris Hemsworth. But you're like, he was essentially the first guy to play Thor in a movie.
He's so statuesque, you know. I mean, he's so tall. I guess that's what he's working with. Yeah.
And you forget because I forget personally because I just watched Full Metal Jacket 2 nights ago, but you forget that he has like a chiseled leading man jawline, but just in the like, and in David's background, it's most apparent. The open mouth pile face, not the thing. Not the crazy Kubrick face, which he also succeeds at greatly, but the open mouth big dumb baby face that D'Onofrio has on is unreal. It's like to live like that.
Yes. And like his eyes are just dead. The whole movie, it's that thing where you're talking to someone and you can't figure out if they understand what you're saying or not. Just his introduction with Ermey trying to get him to stop smiling and he cannot.
It's genuinely really funny. You immediately start giggling because you understand the feeling of like, the more this guy screams at me to stop laughing, the funnier it would get. Like,
God,
you also
my mom would be inescapable.
We were asked to leave Easter Sunday Mass one time because me and my brothers could not. My dad wasn't there, the real disciplinarian. My mom was there, and my littlest brother farted, and the three of us could not stop laughing about it. And like other people, and like we're in church, so it's even harder not to not laugh. You know what I mean? Like it's that same energy. And my mom's going, "Knock it off!" And then like an old lady's coming over, and it's like, "Could you please have your boys be quiet?" And we're like, well, if Jason wouldn't have farted, like we can't stop. That night, my dad gets home from work at midnight. This is like too dramatic for real life, but like we all have to get up and stand in the living room like drill sergeant style and get yelled at by my dad because he's an angry alcoholic and the punishment guy. But he's doing that, and me and my brothers are locked exactly back into we can't laugh. And now it's even more scary. And it's like twice in one day we have to live the whole like you're trying to lock it up and it's impossible. So I relate hard to Pyle in that moment, and not just because I'm fat and soft.
You have to imagine that like if you're seeing this in a theater as a new release, the audience is laughing up until that point, right? Like what Ermey's doing is so over the top, so extreme, so relentless that like the whole audience is cackling uncomfortably. But when you cut to D'Onofrio and he's laughing now, he's the first person on screen who also recognizes the absurdity of this. It feels like cathartic. Like not only like I understand that's what I would be doing in this situation, but it's like this is what I'm doing now watching this.
Right.
How is everyone else able to maintain their composure? And then there's the tension of like even when he's being choked, he can't stop. You know, it's like it's impossible for him to stop.
And I do love that Ermey is like, I'm not going to choke you. You're going to choke yourself on me. So I am not culpable for what is happening. It's great.
Right. Right. The shift of choke yourself, reaches for his hands. You fucking
don't
idiot.
Touch me.
My hands. Then he reaches for Ermey's hands. He's like, don't fucking pull my arms towards you.
No, you will
your
get
neck.
down. Yes.
So fucking crazy.
You will do all the work.
The bag of oranges thing is like so brutal. You know, especially because, as you said, you have this moment of compassion between Pyle and Joker, and then just that hazing moment.
You mean the soap party?
Sorry.
It's soap,
Yes.
Blanket. They call it a blanket party, right?
Yeah. Oranges are famously the ones that, if in a towel, wouldn't leave a bruise.
I know that. That's why I assumed.
Yeah.
But I don't think they have a lot of oranges on hand.
Well, Liam Vitale was fucking throwing them at Ermey.
They're all smashed. They're all on the floor.
Well, he used them all. Exactly. He fucked up.
Yeah.
That sequence hit me so fucking hard on this movie.
It's horrible.
Like his acting of being in pain after the fact, and like this whole time you're kind of viewing Pyle as a baby in the pity way and the like annoying way of like, oh, this and then when he's like literally in his underwear on top of a bunk bed, literally crying like a baby, and you're like, oh my fucking God. Like he's been dehumanized, like back to zero. You know what I mean? Like he's been brought back to being a newborn, and he's reborn as an absolute fucking psychopath.
Right.
Well,
and
it's like,
nothing.
right.
Yes.
You know, A, he's in a tremendous amount of pain, right? But B, it also just feels like he's finally releasing all of the abuse he's been suffering for who knows how long.
And I think the Joker thing is like, and Joker even feels that. Like, that's like
final straw.
Yeah, it's the final straw of like, shit, everyone, because he said earlier, everyone hates me. You hate me. Oh, man. Is Private Pyle's voice up there with Buffalo Bill's voice from Silence of the Lambs, of like voices you kind of want to do and are iconic?
Ted Levine would work in this movie,
for some reason.
Actually, he'd be great.
He would.
He could be a great rafter man.
Here's a good, he would be. Yeah, there you go. Here's a good D'Onofrio quote. Apparently, before one scene, Kubrick said, "I want you to be big, Lon Chaney big." They shot 3 takes, and then they sat down and watched the tape, and they were sitting next to each other. And after the 3rd take, Stanley took his fist and gently rubbed it against Vincent D'Onofrio. Vincent has never forgotten that. It was the approval from Kubrick. That's all he would do. He would just give you a little. And the other thing D'Onofrio says is like, he was very supportive. We used to have conversations in the trailer. We never talked about the project. We would just talk about boxing or football or whatever. Like that was the vibe.
The other thing I saw is that D'Onofrio was like studying Lon Chaney the entire time. Like that was the guy he was sort of trying to build his performance off of, and had never expressed that to Kubrick. So when Kubrick gave him that direction, it was like, okay, it's working.
Hell yeah. Right. Yeah. I mean, that kind of rules.
Another thing that stood out for me a long time ago, I watched a director's commentary. I can barely remember, or it's not even director's commentary. I watched the commentary with the screenwriter, D'Onofrio, and I forget who else is in there. And D'Onofrio says he's listening to No Woman, No Cry a lot in between takes on his headphones, which is just like interesting choice. But then you sort of get it, like weirdly, like, and maybe I'm just like, you know, want to get it, so I'm pretending I get it, but it makes total sense.
It does, yeah. I don't
it's
know,
like soft. It's like soft. It's upsetting, but it's also very gentle. There's something about it. I don't know.
Yeah.
Kubrick says Matthew Modine is as if Gary Cooper and Henry Fonda had a baby. High praise.
Wow.
Modine, 3 of his brothers and 1 of his sisters served in Vietnam. So he said, like, I just grew up with Vietnam. Like,
Jesus.
We'd listen to the radio, we'd listen to the body count, is how he puts it. I was, old enough to understand what was going on. I was probably interested in the role because I grew up with it. He says he has this long. Did you read the thing where he tells the joke to Kubrick, Griffin, in the dossier? All right, well, he goes over to Kubrick and he's like, I'm going to tell you a joke. You're dead and you're up in heaven, and Steven Spielberg has just died, and he's being greeted at the gate by Gabriel, and Gabriel says, God likes a lot of your movies and he wants to make sure you're comfortable. Is anything you need? And Steven says, well, I always wanted to meet Stanley Kubrick. Could I arrange that? And Gabriel says, Steven, why would you ask me that? Stanley Kubrick doesn't take meetings. That's the joke. Yes. And then the second part of the joke is that they go around heaven and Steven sees a guy wearing an army jacket with a beard, and he says, look, there's Stanley Kubrick. Can I say hello? And Gabriel says, that's not Stanley Kubrick. That's God. He just thinks he's Stanley Kubrick. Wow. And Modine says, Stanley liked that joke. So there you go. Stanley had a sense of humor about him being God. No, he's obviously a wryly funny guy, I think.
Yeah, that's something that I picked up on this viewing too. And besides the obvious humor in someone berating someone else, besides that humor, the back half of the movie, it has like the wise ass humor in the second act with the journalism stuff. You're like, you get like a lot of like the cheeky, because now it's like the smart guys hanging out in the back, and there's humor in that,
being funny to what's his name, John Terry, who's the editor in chief, right?
Absolute fucking hunk, absolute.
John Terry hot. very hot.
Objectively, like when he's on screen, I'm like, Jesus Christ, that's what movie stars look like.
Jack's dad from Lost, right?
He is best known as Jack's dad from Lost to our generation.
Has aged beautifully. Fucking Silver Fox.
Yeah, he did age very nicely. It's true. He's in ER for ER super fans. And he would often play like really dark guys, much like, like Jack's dad on Lost.
Yeah.
And you see him in this and you're just like, why wasn't this guy a huge movie star? He's so handsome in that like totally like, cut chin, perfect face kind of thing. I don't know.
I think he's the drunk absentee father in The Big Green as well.
That's right. He is.
Yeah.
The soccer movie?
Yeah.
With Gutenberg?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, he incredibly good.
Humor in the third part in the shit. Rafter Man on like I never picked up on how funny and an evolution that this character has. And it's so fucking. I mean, we have the funny scene in the bunks where it's like you never saw action. We set up the 1,000-yard stare that we've already seen a couple of times, and now we have named it, and then we will get to see it again from other characters. But Rafter Man kind of being like a soft, weird photographer, kind of not, and then when they're doing the documentary and he's all of a sudden he's like, I'll when shit hits the fan, I'll put the camera down and go to the gun. And you're like, you fucking lie. And then later on, he's literally like kills a fucking young, he has to, it's not like he's a murderer, but he kills a young woman. And like, that's his evolution is that he kills a 15-year-old girl and is a hero for it. But he goes from like camera guy barfing in the helicopter to like, and that character, that's such a rich, funny character that you just meet as dumb photo friend of Joker. And by the end of the movie, he's like indicative of what the war can do to a person in a different way than we see on the other people. Yeah.
This actor retired from acting, has not appeared in anything since 1999, is now referred to as the king of Hollywood headshots, became a photographer, and is apparently the best headshot photographer around.
Well, he has a lot of experience. He has 9 cameras on him in this movie.
I know.
So he must have. And you heard it's a 200-day shoot. So homie got some practice with the Canon.
Yeah, you can. Headshotphotography.com is his website. He nabbed that.
Wow. Early URL grabber.
Yeah, the ongoing sort of like discourse of like, did Kubrick have a sense of humor? Was he funny? This and that sort of shit. I do feel like now, having watched all the movies, rewatched for this miniseries and everything, I rank Strangelove lower in the pack of movies I find funny by him. Like I
know what you're saying.
Barry Lyndon, this, Shining, even Eyes Wide Shut, Clockwork Orange to a degree. Like I think that run is all
incredibly mordant humor.
Funny. Yes. Yeah, and maybe just more my sense of humor, but I find myself actually laughing at these movies more than Strangelove, where I watch it and I'm like, this is funny. But you have people giving comedic performances. You have more conventional jokes. And like
all the other movies you described, the comedy comes as tension cutters in a way that would make him hit a little harder.
And him like weaponizing his status as Kubrick. Like how much of the comedy in this movie comes from song choices?
Yeah, the song
where
choices.
He cuts and what he cuts to.
Ending on the Mickey Mouse March, stuff like that, where you're just like, but like I feel like what you're saying, Griff, it's like you're not saying like, you know what, Dr. Strangelove is mid humor wise. You're more saying like Kubrick's sense of humor makes the most sense when he is directing a horror film or war film, or that is where it just perfectly matches with the kind of very, very dark humor that he obviously has within him. I mean, Dr. Strangelove is a great comedy. It's a great film. It's very funny, but I think it is sort of unsettling in its trying to be a comedy or whatever.
Yeah, and it's also like, I think by his own admission, it's like, this isn't my kind of comedy. I will let Peter Sellers figure this part of the movie out.
Sure.
Right. Whereas the comedy he is able to exert as a director in the other 5 movies I just cited is like putting very earnest, impassioned, committed performances that are not winking at all in the center of the film, and then building the humor of contrast around them.
A little bit of context on something we've already talked about. Kubrick told Ken Adam, his famous production designer, you need to find every location within a 20-mile radius of my home.
Great.
Which was basically the same thing he told him for Barry Lyndon, but I think, with Lyndon, they did eventually go to Ireland and stuff. But they almost entirely used London and its suburbs to be South Carolina, to be Vietnam, to be, they have fucking helicopter shots where they're going over the jungle. That's like, I assume, the frickin' Lake District or whatever.
All of the battlefield sequences were shot in Kubrick's kitchen. He just set it on fire.
Light it up.
Like,
his backyard is fully on fire. All right, action.
I just didn't want to have to commute.
The boot camp, they use like a British territorial army base, so that makes it, it's a boot camp. Like, you don't really need too much there. The most interesting part is all the Tet Offensive stuff they shot in Beckton, which is basically like in the Docklands, which is like at the time in the 80s, this like abandoned industrial area, like a very depressed industrial area. And all that does, when you're watching, the stuff where they're like, it's dark and they're shooting and it's this like crazy bombed out kind of like urban landscape. It does work. But as you were saying, it's a very urban war environment versus almost every Vietnam movie we see that's like obviously been shot in like the Philippines or whatever and is like taking advantage of like a jungle landscape.
But that is weirdly what works to its advantage is like the actual
It's
Vietnam
different.
City stuff in the movie is really good. And the other movies don't really try for that as much.
Yeah, it's all jungles and hooches and all that stuff.
Right.
This there's a sequence where when they throw the smoke to hide from the sniper, I don't mean to jump around too much, but when they throw the smoke to hide from the sniper and they sprint into vanishing horizon, like that shit, you don't like the follow shot of these guys just disappearing into it's so real, so ham-fistedly metaphorical, but like also at the same time hits you where you're like, shit, these guys are like running into not existing anymore, and then a handful of them will no longer exist after this moment.
The moment they send 8-Ball out and you're just watching him get smaller and smaller in the frame going in, and you're just like, I know what's going to happen here.
Well, also it's like unspoken. There's a lot of spoken racism in this movie, and then a lot of unspoken racism, like the idea. First of all, the name 8-Ball is a classic racial term. And then also sending him out alone, like it feels so fucked up. And the other cool thing about and this has nothing to do with the race stuff, but I'm just, while it's on my mind, watching Cowboy climb the ranks within 16 minutes of the movie, he goes from like 5th in command to fully squad leader.
Right.
And over the course of the movie, apparently, I don't know this, I only read it in my dossier. The joke, Private Joker is a sergeant by like the end of the movie. Like he's going up in ranks. Yeah, it's sort of that like failing upwards of the military, but then you see it nakedly displayed where it's like it's not failing upwards. There are vacancies. Like,
yeah, the people are dying.
People be dying. Yeah.
Or leaving or getting wounded and all that. Yeah.
Cowboy's kind of like fully unremarkable too,
Yes.
Right. He's not good
There's
or
nothing
bad.
about him except that he's Joker's friend.
Right.
And he's only Joker's friend because he stood next to him on day one.
Right, because they got stuck in the same shit together. Yeah.
And their fucking DI and one of their guys in their platoon fucking died on the last day.
Yeah, and he was jerking off just so much to get out of it, and he still, Adam Baldwin.
I'm like, if that could have gotten you discharged from the military, I wouldn't have had to worry that much in this era.
Wait a second.
I would have been like,
one, I'm gone. You know what I'm saying, guys?
Right. Yeah.
Let me just bring National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation with me.
I
I got flat arches and hairy palms. Discharge me
got
immediately.
a Sears catalog. Does everyone know what I'm saying? All right. They're shooting at what's called the Beckton Gas Works, which was the largest gas plant in the world and was basically scheduled for demolition. And so British Gas, the company that owned it, was just like, do what you want. You want to blow shit up? Fine. Like, who cares?
Yeah.
And all the actors in retrospect are like, we were probably breathing in the most like insane fumes. Like, this was like an abandoned gas factory. Fuck
The
knows
fact that
what-
there's so much concrete on fire
Yes.
makes no
Yeah.
sense. Like
It's
they're
not
just like
good.
it's like this concrete is just burning the entire time, like 12 different buildings. It looks so good, but you're right. It feels like that would be like lethal for and you know that this 8-Ball, the actor describes his. Like they took like 6 weeks to shoot that portion where they're like creeping up, and 8-Ball describes he's like, I literally laid on the ground for 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Like I was like,
Jesus.
I didn't even think of that as an actor. It's like we can't even put a mannequin out there because he is kind of alive, you know?
Right.
So-
I mean, the last 20 minutes of the movie are just orange.
yes.
Yes.
David, we were joking about this with the Doughboys over text. I don't think we've said this on mic,
Go ahead.
but the thing of like, we're almost surprised that Universal didn't let Christopher Nolan drop an actual nuke for Oppenheimer.
Right, just let him blow one up. Come on, give
Right.
him just one. Just one.
Right. At this point where you're just like, if the master wants it
Right.
and he claims the
Clear
first
some
military.
space out. Hey,
He's-
everyone,
he's-
get out of here. No
He's
one
gonna
wants
drop
to
a
blow up.
tactical nuke in Van Nuys, and they're gonna
Right.
get it. You know, they're gonna use 12 cameras on it.
Right. Don't worry, folks. They are shooting it on IMAX. We're going to get really good footage.
All right, Adam Baldwin, famously chill guy. I actually don't know what he's up to lately, but I feel like he was the first celebrity when you were like, oh, I'll follow him on Twitter. Oh, this is fun. An actor I like has a Twitter account. And then like 10 minutes in, you were like, oh, Jesus Christ, I have to unfollow this guy. Does
One of
anyone else
my
have that experience?
Oh yeah, absolutely. One of my favorite types of IMDb trivia fact is, of course, IMDb user comes to conclusion on their own, presents it to everyone to show how smart and perceptive they are.
Right. Sure.
Where's the one here? It's essentially, I want to try to get the wording right here, but it's essentially like Matthew Modine plays a liberal character in the movie, which is funny because he is also liberal in life. Whereas Adam Baldwin is more conservative and plays a conservative character.
That's a pretty reductive way of looking at Full Metal Jacket, I'll say.
Yeah.
I don't know if I would call Animal
That's
Mother
such-
conservative.
There's such a that's such a modern look at it, where it's like, well, there's a classic delineation between
Yeah.
people in America,
Right.
liberals and conservatives. It's like, whoa, that's only recently a battleground.
I found it. I have to read this verbatim just because the wording of this is incredible. The casting of Joker and Animal Mother can be seen as a case of art imitating life, : Matthew Modine is an outspoken liberal Democrat, not too dissimilar to Joker, who is clearly more of a dove and may not have any religious preference. He tells Sergeant Hartman he does not believe in the Virgin Mary. Meanwhile, Animal Mother's hawkish instinct can be somewhat of a parallel to Adam Baldwin's
Yeah,
conservatism.
he's really hawkish. Yeah, that's how
Yes.
I would describe the guy with 80 bandoliers of fucking giant bullets around him. Very hawkish.
Hawk
of
and
him.
dove. Yes.
I would say Adam Baldwin is excellent in this movie. He's generally a great actor. I really like Adam Baldwin as an actor. He's good at playing this type of a guy.
Yeah, I mean, he's sort of the anti D'Onofrio, what you're talking about, Gabrus, where it's like you watch him in this, you're like, how did this guy not get roles this good for the rest of his career? And then it's like,
Right.
oh, he's a nightmare to work with.
It's a bit of a pain. But he does have one good story, which is that he would play chess with Kubrick all the time, which I feel like there's a story from every movie or some guy playing with chess with him all the time. And he said, we'd lay out the board and he would kind of waddle over and wipe you out in 15 moves. And one time, I do like him saying that he would waddle. Over you.
And like,
You can picture it for some reason.
yeah, the
You
classic
can.
Kubrick waddle and wipeout.
One time I actually got him to blunder and I won the game. Big deal. 1 out of 50. But I said, hey, I got you. You have to resign. And he said to me, the only reason you won, Adam, is because I have so little respect for your game that I made a blunder. Now get back to work. And then he had a little wry grin and he walked away. Waddled away.
Oh, man.
I do like
man.
that, though, that he was just an absolutely sore loser.
Yeah.
David.
Yeah.
Once again, this episode brought to you by Mubi never gets old.
We love them. It's
We
a
love
curated
'em.
streaming service. They show exceptional films from around the globe. Every day they premiere a new film, iconic directors, emerging auteurs, always something new to discover. Each film hand-selected. It's like your own personal film festival, streaming anywhere, anytime. I guess this ad reads over.
Here's a fun fact we just learned.
What's that?
One of those emerging filmmakers they spotlight in the early days of the service, he's waving his hands and saying we shouldn't mention it, but we're mentioning it. J.D. Amato.
There he
The beginning of
is.
Mubi when it was mostly short films.
Embarrassed
They
AF.
spotlighted him. He's turning red.
Pixar's turning red. No, look, We like movie. We talk about them all the time.
We like them. We love them.
They also have a fun little print-only magazine devoted to the art and culture of cinema, created, prepared, and published by Mubi.
Paper. Mubi's nice, but on the touch screens and whatever, I like to hold a thing in my hands. I like to feel the rustling paper between my finger, the ink.
Yes.
Ben's
Notebook.
doing paper foley.
Yes, Notebook is published biannually. It's a yearly subscription that includes 2 beautiful issues. Comes with an exclusive gift that's a surprise just for magazine subscribers, and shipping is free wherever you are.
Can I say this?
Yes.
They sent us each a copy, very kindly, of the newest issue. And this magazine is THICC.
It is a big boy.
It's hefty.
Yes,
This isn't a little pamphlet.
And it's got a nice in-depth conversation with Ryusuke Hamaguchi, and you know it's hefty.
It's hefty.
It's in-depth.
It looks good, and it's like printed on a heavy cardstock. Like it's like hefty paper towels.
Some other stuff. A close-up look at the stunning celluloid collection of the Centre Pompidou in Paris. Did you go there?
I didn't. I was in Paris recently. I did go to the Planet Hollywood that's closing, one of the final locations. And I got LA lasagna.
Did you go to the Centre Pompidou? And you're like, no. Shh, I went to Planet Hollywood.
I went to Planet Hollywood, and I saw the sword from the Masters of the Universe movie, covered in fake cobwebs for Halloween.
That sounds good. Anyway, Mubi is great, and so you can find out more. Subscriptions open for issues 2 and 3. You can subscribe for $40 a year. Find out more at Mubi.com/magazine. And you can try Mubi.com free for 30 days at Mubi.com/check. That's MUBI.com/check for a whole month of great cinema for free. Mubi.
We love you, Mubi.
We love you, Mubi.
We love you, Mubi.
Well, a scene I wanted to spotlight that really disturbed me this time around, this viewing, is when we're meeting in the third part, the platoon.
Mm-hmm.
There's I don't remember the character's name, but he reveals the dead soldier.
The guy whose birthday party it is.
Dude.
Yes.
Yeah.
Who you think is just like a sleeping guy,
Yeah.
like a
He's
dude
got a hat
taking
over his
Indiana
head, yeah.
Jones style nap. Yeah.
And obviously it's disturbing, it's a dead person, but I like really listened to like what he's saying in that monologue.
Yeah.
And it's like it's kind of this thing where we're like talking about how the comedy really works in this movie because of the context of what's happening. It's war.
Mm-hmm.
This is like a comedy bit, right? Or like it's like
He's being
trying
funny.
to be
It's
funny.
the opposite. It's
and
like,
it's
yeah.
so fucking terrifying.
But that's pretty much anytime anyone in this movie tries to be funny, it's upsetting.
Yeah.
And anytime people are serious, it's kind of funny.
Like it's like he's doing this bit and you're like, this person is never going to be the same.
Right.
Like this person has lost their mind.
Yeah, that's the I mean, it's so much what
You
this
got
movie
8-Ball
is.
defending Animal Mother. You got like fucking what's his name, Touchdown, who we meet briefly, like Edo Ross.
Yeah, Edo
the guy-
Ross. Love Edo Ross. Great
Big.
actor.
The best.
Look, coming from Action Boys, we're Edo Ross.
Hidden?
heads.
Wait,
He's-
you're telling me
been
that
in,
you like Edo Ross?
I mean,
Yeah.
The Hidden, I assume you guys have done The Hidden on Action Boys.
We have
It's
not
one of my
yet,
favorite
no.
80s movies. What? Oh,
No.
God. Can I come on from The Hidden, please?
Of course.
Okay, great. I love that movie. Great Edo
he
Ross performance.
Edo Ross plays a different nationality in like 12 movies in a row.
Yeah,
he's
correct.
like
He
a
just played
Russian
every
bad guy.
kind
He's
of
like a Latino
European.
bad guy. He's like
I mean, he owns the flower shop on 6 Feet Under,
Oh,
right?
he's so
Yes.
good in that. Yeah,
So
that's like a
good.
later in life role for him where
Yeah.
he is really good. And I feel like because he dates Frances Conroy for a while, and his like dating style is like you should date me. Hey, why don't we go out? You know, like he's just doing that the whole time. It's great.
Man, you want to hear a weird Ed O'Neill credit? I'm sorry,
Ross.
Ed O'Ross
Edo Ross.
credit. Weird. You want to hear a weird Ed O'Neill credit? He
Sure,
was on
Modern
Married
Family?
with Children. No one talks about it. No.
Fuck.
Weird Ed O'Ross credit. He was the voice of Agent K on the Men in Black cartoon show.
Huh.
He
That's
did
fun.
TLJ.
He was doing TLJ. I guess I could
Yeah.
see him being a diet TLJ. He's
Yeah.
also he's itchy in Dick Tracy, and he's kind of
Yes.
unrecognizable in that, but he's really good.
Wait a second. I'm sorry. You're telling me someone is unrecognizable in Dick Tracy?
but like in Red Heat, he plays a Russian. In Lethal
Yeah.
Weapon, he plays a Latino, and then
Yep.
in Universal Soldier, he plays an American like colonel. like,
Yeah, he could do like a cigar chomping thing too.
and then in
Yeah,
this,
yeah.
he's a Notre Dame football player. Like there's not much more American. And then that kicks off we meet someone, they die. We meet someone, they die. We meet someone, or Joker meets someone, they die, however you want to look at it. And it's so realistic. They're like, hey, where's Cowboy? We're coming to meet. Oh, Cowboy's up there. And then it's just like everyone that they meet along the way dies. And it's just like, if you mapped it out outline wise, you'd be like, this is so cartoonish. It's like the leader dies, then the next leader dies, then the next leader dies. And it's like, it seems cartoonish on the page, but watching it in this movie, it feels so realistic how a guy like Cowboy, who is just a random banana from fucking a platoon, is now leading a squad in like an anti-sniper mission and shit. It's fucking... I never picked up on all of that stuff, like the war is hell elements that aren't said out loud. Like I'm more like Boku Bucks, you know, like when I'm first watched this, like I'm embarrassed by how many times I watch this and Clockwork Orange as sort of like sick, hit him with the giant concrete dick, you know?
Don't be embarrassed. It's okay.
Yeah, whatever.
All right,
Hosley,
you're in good
Haas and
company.
I can go in on this. I think as
I
like
get it.
recovering dirtbags.
Yeah.
Like I feel like we can like speak to that like ex dirtbag life. But on this I'm and now I'm like crazy, you know, an anti-war person, anti-military person, and like watching it, I'm like, holy shit. Oh man, this movie is so rich and real and has such a strong take on war that I had previously just been like, drip down to crack your ass, end up a stain on the mattress is the coolest thing anyone could ever say.
Quotes.
I do love good. Remember when on Facebook we would all have our favorite quotes?
Yeah.
What an
AOL,
era.
Instant messenger away mess.
Oh.
And look, again,
Oh,
I know
yeah.
I
Oh,
like
yeah.
to be the 40-year-old in the room, but I used to make
Please.
mix CDs, burn CDs with movie quotes in between songs.
Oh, I would do the same.
Adorable.
I think about the time I spent assembling mix CDs, sending them out in the mail, handwriting liner notes, you know, and being like, how many skits can I fit on before it's too many? Like, what's the balance between comedy and spoken word and actual music?
By the way, Gabrus, I'm about to be 37. You're not that much older than me.
No, I know.
You're a grand old man over here.
And my bar mitzvah's next week, so I'm about to be a man.
You're about to be a man. Yeah.
Yeah.
Meeting Griffin when he's like an 11-year-old in your improv class just kind of establishes a dynamic that never goes away.
Sure.
Even once you've now seen him be like a 35-year-old with like health issues, you're like, oh,
Yeah.
right, you're an old man, right? Like the
Yeah, it
rest of us.
happens
But
fast.
you meet him when he's a 16-year-old child actor, wide-eyed. You're like, this kid is a fucking baby for life. I'm old. I'm 20 years older than when I met you, and that I don't put that on you.
Right,
At all.
I've stayed the same. Yeah. It is, you know, the strike that people have against this movie of it just being kind of like formless or like incidental, anecdotal kind of, you know, like, oh, they just took the book and it's these 3 sections and shit just kind of happens. All the stuff we're talking about where it's like, when you get to that moment of the guy taking the head off the dead guy and just being like, oh, he's just here and they're all making jokes about it and everything.
Right.
That makes sense to you if you've watched 45 minutes of like boot camp.
Of dehumanization. Yeah.
Right. You know, in the same way that it's like the speed at which people die. I mean, all this stuff. It's like, I do think the odd structure of this movie benefits it in a lot of ways of really placing you into each of the 3 spaces it wants you to consider psychologically as aspects of war and how they interact with each other to get to the point where these guys are just sort of like weird, dead, broken inside. Yeah.
Right.
Along those lines, like the middle chunk is the 12 intellectuals drinking coffee talking about what's wrong with the Vietnam War or whatever. Like that middle chunk gives you that other perspective of like the intelligence, whatever you want to call those people, like hipsters. Like we get to see that perspective for a brief moment and then see Joker's perspective shattered from like the Ted offensive through him chasing down his old buddy. Like you see him destroy himself at Paris Island but survive, and he's still got this personality, but by the end of the movie he will have the 1,000-yard stare. Like he's given the 1,000-yard stare. He's given the choice of something he has to do that will fuck him up for life, or he's already fucked up for life. He's got to do one more. Like it's thinking about it from like that perspective, like you're saying, the 3 different movies, each one makes the other ones hit harder.
Right. That's the thing.
Yeah.
And like the middle section is him feeling like pretty cocky that he has figured out the exact amount of healthy distance he can have from this incredibly unhealthy thing to not have it destroy him. Right? It psychologically, literally kill him, all of that.
There's something to that they're working for Stars and Stripes that never really hit me in past viewings, of that they're journalists, but they're part of the military.
Propagandists.
Yeah. Right.
I'm going to stick up for Stars and Stripes. It's not propaganda at all. I know people who work for Stars and Stripes, and it is much more complicated than that than calling it propaganda. But back in the day, they certainly, especially in Vietnam, had their limitations.
Well, yeah, I think they shaded a little bit here.
Right.
Like they shaded a little bit from him, of like from the hunk. Explaining to us, Lockhart is his name in the movie, but like he kind of is like, people don't want to hear that. People don't want to hear the real shit right now.
Right. Whenever he's like around other sort of like grunts or superiors or whatever, they're like, well, you're going to do the right kind of piece, right? Even if it's not he's being told those are the marching orders from his editor as much, there is that assumption of like, you're not one of these fucking lefty outside journalists coming in and writing some judgment on us.
I love also in the third act, every time he meets someone, they change, they get excited.
Yes.
Like the energy of these people who are in the absolute hell are like, oh, wait, I could be famous. Oh, wait, hold on. What's my character's story? Like, who am I?
What's my bit? Yeah.
How do I convey my, like that run when they're doing the documentary, Kubrick shooting a fucking war movie is a war doc is a wild fucking like, zoom out moment, but everyone changing like their POV or their attitude once they're rolling on themselves. Like Rafterman is, I brought it up earlier, but we hear it from a lot of these guys, like their posturing, their creating of their character or their creating of their belief in war.
Mm-hmm. It's like they're actors in a movie, Yeah.
Whoa.
War
is hell. Making movies is harder.
Yeah, that's the main takeaway from this movie. The only Oscar nomination this gets is screenplay.
Did it get a sound nomination maybe, or is it just screenplay? Yeah,
it's just kind of
screenplay.
Wild. Even if this didn't hit in the major categories, you're like, you don't give this cinematography, you don't give this sound.
Yeah, it is. Let's look at cinematography. Because
while we're on the subject of cinematography, I talked about that beautiful shot of everyone running into the smoke. Another great one is from Paris Island when they're all covered in mud and running at camera.
Yeah.
And I in the director's commentary, the commentary, I remember hearing D'Onofrio saying when they watched that clip back, everyone was really impressed. Like Kubrick wanted to seem like a stampede of buffaloes. And it, like when you watch, and it really, they're filling the frame, coming right at them with covered in mud, and you see like everyone is now like becoming the killer the Marine version of themselves. It's a fucking great storytelling in one frame. It's like if we're gassing up cinematographer.
The nominees were Last Emperor, which is like the big winner of 1987 on every like technical award, right?
Yeah.
And then Empire of the Sun and Hope and Glory, which are similarly big epic movies.
Sure.
And then Maetawan, which is Haskell Wexler in his like old age, absolutely fucking crushing it. And then Broadcast News, which is sort of a surprise nominee. It's Michael Ballhaus, but that movie does have great cinematography. But I guess yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, they're not bad nominees, is what I'm saying. And then sound, it's losing out to like Empire of the Sun, Lethal Weapon, RoboCop, Witches of Eastwick, and Last Emperor. I mean, I'm surprised too.
Yeah.
Maybe there was, Griff, some internal resistance to Kubrick, the King of England, right? Like this sort of like, hey man, you don't want to work in Hollywood? Because like these are trade, voters essentially.
Right.
Maybe that was it. I don't know. I genuinely don't know. But obviously The Shining, Full Metal Jacket, and Eyes Wide Shut are all basically ignored by the Oscars after, a run of his movies getting lots of Oscar attention.
I know the one that's wild is that Clockwork Orange got
Best Picture. Yeah, totally. Yeah.
You feel like that's the one that would have totally turned them off.
Right, but that's, I guess, such an exciting time for the Oscars, and they make mostly good choices in this, but it does feel like, starting with The Shining, for whatever reason, the Oscar game is and I'm sure Kubrick did not really play it either, right? Like I'm sure he did not.
You think this guy didn't do the campaign? You think Kubrick wasn't out there doing cocktail parties? Yeah,
dude. I remember reading an interview with Pacino or hearing it somewhere where he was like talking about the Oscars, like I don't want to go to that bullshit, and it's like it felt like imagine an actor with that attitude now. How much we got like our legendary actors are selling fucking like content like online. I know. You know, like, and this was comes like things have evolved so much. You have to be so much more than just like you used to be able to be like a freak actor. Just be like, oh yeah, that guy's just like a freak and he's so good and stuff.
But the amount of press about Florence Pugh not doing press,
it's insane. The amount we're talking about this movie. Don't worry, darling. I think you're referencing the amount we're talking about this movie. Like, I wish we didn't know this much.
But that the cornerstone of it is like she's only done 6 interviews for the movie. Clearly, there's a big problem here, and I'm like, yeah, the problem is that marketing is insane on all of these fucking things.
Yeah, the problem is that she's expected to do 60.
Right,
and it's like, why?
It's
a fucking.
I can't speak to the inner workings of all this dynamic, but it's like the idea that it's like. She's doing nothing for this film. She hasn't been putting out the hashtags.
that makes me want to go into the latrine with Charlene and fucking paint the fucking tile with my brain. Full Metal Jacket.
One thing I want to shout out is, of course, the score is credited to Abigail Mead, but that is Kubrick's daughter, right? Vivian Kubrick. Who did not want to be judged by her last name, so she had the pseudonym, and it's like this weird sort of synthesizer score. It's very cool. It was disqualified from Oscar consideration because it was too short, like literally.
There's not a lot of it. Yeah,
it's like 22 minutes long. Yeah.
The soundtrack is so iconic in this movie that you think about that when you think about the entire movie and the music. But on watching it, you're like, and that. I mean, soundscapey, synthy music is like my dream in movies. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I love, all the Michael Mann, Carpenter, all that's
right.
Yeah, that's all my wheelhouse. And then I really picked up on it this time. And then the juxtaposition of that to like these boots are made for walking is such a fucking fun, rich dynamic as well.
Surfin' Bird.
Yeah, the way that's
used. Song. Best novelty song, hands down, ever made.
Yeah.
Fucking The Trashmen. I got to see them, actually, at a WFMU record fair. And it was, they were all in their 60s, and like...
Did they do Surfin' Bird?
Black. Of course they did.
No, they didn't.
They fucking crushed. It was so incredible. Like 60-year-old men with like black dyed hair, still wearing skin-tight black jeans, black shirt, and they fucking ripped.
I mean, bless them. The Trashmen, also a great name for a band.
We should change the bit from screaming Freebird at concerts to screaming Surfer Bird at concerts.
Surfing Bird.
So fun.
I first fell in love with that song in Frankie and Annette's "Back to the Beach," the humunga cowabunga from Down Under.
Yeah.
Pee Wee Herman dances to "Bird, Bird, Bird." Bird is the word.
Vivian Kubrick did a score for Eyes Wide Shut that wasn't used, right? This is her only used score. She was sort of the protege of his daughter,
Jocelyn Pook,
right?
Who does the Eyes Wide Shut score?
But Vivian was the one who was working on all the sets, did the Shining documentary, obviously.
And I believe she did one for Full Metal Jacket as well. That's called like Shooting Full Metal Jacket. I've never seen it.
But I just Kubrick said he just wanted no recognizable instruments. He wanted like a score that sounded different and was harder to place. And it's coming off of like Wendy Carlos delivering 2 of the best electronic scores ever.
Yeah. It's so interesting how with Kubrick, it's like he has so much iconic. His movies are iconic musically, obviously, right? Like the soundtracks, the music that he picks, and then they always have these idiosyncratic actual scores, or often have, right? Like the Wendy Carlos stuff like this. I love it. He's a cool guy. I actually think he's a good director, guys.
I think the thing he's good at doing is making films,
making films, filmmaking. This film. Made $38 million against a $17 million budget.
Okay.
In its first 50 days of release, it ultimately grossed 46 domestic and 120 worldwide. It was a hit that
That's
got
the other thing.
mixed
His
reviews.
movies played really well overseas always. If you look at them. Yeah.
But like, I also feel like much like The Shining, it's like it actually did well despite the big investment of time and money.
Yeah.
And the reviews were very like, like on release. That's what, like, both these, and then of course they endure. These are enduring films. But it's funny.
I know there's inflation because I'm on Twitter, but there is 17 million for a movie that went like 150 days over and is like legend. And it's like, that's what like Ryan Reynolds' hair guy got on like Red Scare 2 or Red Alert, whatever the fuck that, the Red Zone, whatever the fuck that movie's called. But it's like,
it was called Red Scare. It was
17 million seems like people are like, if you could make Full Metal Jacket for $17 million.
Right.
What the fuck is Doctor Strange 2, guys? Like, come on.
Because even if you adjust for inflation and you're like, this costs $50 or $60 million, I'm like, over 2 years? It sounds like a bargain to me.
Should we play the box office game?
Yes.
Is there okay, all right. All right, do we want to do the first weekend or the first wide weekend? They're very different. One is full of iconic movies and one is full of trash. Well, not trash. That's too strong. I want to, you know what? I'm going to do the wide weekend, Griffin, because you'll see. All right, so it's first weekend wide. It's limited for the first couple of weekends, then it goes wide. So it's number 2 at the box office, Full Metal Jacket. This is July 10th, 1987. Okay? Number 1 is a comedy sequel.
Number 1 is a comedy sequel in
Not a good one.
87. Is it Beverly Hills Cop 2?
No. I mean, I actually like that movie. That is number 7 at the box office.
That's a good one.
This is not a good comedy sequel. Is it a 2?
It's a 2. And not a good comedy franchise.
Oh, it's not a good comedy franchise.
Is it Police Academy 2?
80s. No, but,
close.
I was going to say Arthur 2 on the rocks.
I mean, good guesses. No.
It's
a similar franchise where it's like,
not
we left
the last
that franchise
one.
in the 80s.
This is a 2.
I believe it's the last it's the last that's not made for TV. There are 2 more that are made for TV.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
2 more that are is it Revenge of the Nerds 2?
And what's the subtitle on that, baby?
Fuck. Is it Nerds in Paradise?
That's right. That's right.
Wow.
The nerds were in paradise.
Right, because I think 3 is Nerds in Love.
That's
for TV.
4.
That's 4.
3 is The Next Generation.
Oh boy. Do you know that like 10, 15 years ago they started filming Revenge of the Nerds remake, and like a week into filming we're just like, what are we doing here? And they just shut it down and never finished it.
I did not know that.
That whoever said what are we doing here should get the Palme d'Or.
Yes.
Like just get whoever said that deserves the highest award you can have in cinema, because thank you. You did more for movie making than Kubrick did by just not making that movie.
Yeah, they right. This was it. They shot, I think, for like a week on some campus, and then the college read the script and was like, "Leave immediately. We do not approve."
You guys don't even have the third act rape by the hero, and we don't even want to watch this movie.
That's one reason this franchise should be left for dead. And then Fox watched the dailies and was like, "You know what, guys? Forget it.
We don't need to restart this." I'm trying to remember who it is, but it was like some current film producer executive who worked there at the time. No, I think Howard Stern was involved in it, and Adam Brody maybe as well. It had
Adam
names
Brody was
attached
in
to
it. Yeah, he was in it. Yeah.
But one of the executives, when they were at that point where like they had lost their location and they were deciding whether or not to put it back up, they watched the footage and they were like, wait, nerds aren't like this anymore. Like that was apparently the big point they made. The meme was they were like, the rest of our Fox film slate is superhero films. They have one. They don't act like this. They don't look like this.
They do not
There's
seek
nothing
revenge
for them to overcome anymore. And that was
they
even
run
said,
the world.
That was said 15 years ago. Like they weren't even aware of how much worse it was going to become.
Number 1 is Revenge of the Nerds 2, nonetheless. Number 2 is Full Metal Jacket. Number 3...
I'm sure Kubrick loved that.
Who are these nerds?
Yeah.
Number 3...
Kubrick goes, nerds! Like ogre.
Yes. Number 3 is a very sort of well-known film take on a hit TV show that is bad. Yes.
So it's okay. So it's not The Untouchables.
No, it's a comedy version of, along those
Car
lines.
54, Where Are You?
No, but very close now.
I'm close.
Dragnet.
There you go.
There we go.
Dragnet with Dan Aykroyd and Tom Hanks. Just the facts. These days, I feel like mostly famous for its bizarre City of Crime rap video that you can Google anytime you want.
But also, what a
just
bizarre high concept premise for that movie of like, the bit is we're taking Dragnet, a deadly serious show, making it as a comedy where the joke is one guy acts like he's in Dragnet and everyone else does not.
Because it's Aykroyd he's Joe Friday Jr. or whatever, right? Like he's the new Joe Friday and he just acts like Joe Friday, but it's the 80s now.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds good. Dragnet, never seen it. Number 4 is a high concept sci-fi comedy that we will cover on this podcast one day.
We will cover it on this podcast one day. In 1987 is a high concept sci-fi dramedy. It's not a McTiernan.
I would call it a comedy. It's not a McTiernan. No.
Just thinking of people in the Someday file. It's not a Joe Dante.
It is a Joe Dante.
It is a Joe Dante. Fuck. Okay. 89 is The Burbs.
89 is The Burbs. That's right.
Is it The Explorers?
That's 85. It's the movie in between those two.
86. Inner Space?
Inner Space.
There we go.
Martin Short.
Yeah.
Dennis Quaid, obviously. Meg Ryan. I love that movie.
Yeah.
I haven't seen it in a long time.
It's that run post Gremlins where Dante has these movies that like score through the roof in test screenings, and everyone's like, it's another hit for you, Joe, and all of them underperform. And they're mostly all good.
Right.
He's working with like good actors, good premises.
Is Explorers good?
Explorers is the one where it's like one of those truly unfinished movies where they didn't let him shoot the last act of it. And he's kind of disowned it because he's like, I just fundamentally did not get to finish shooting the script.
I remember liking it as a kid because of real like wish fulfillment shit. But there's nothing that stands out to me about loving it. You know what I mean? Like
it is good. It just is very much a movie marred by being like, there's clearly a version of this that wasn't made that was just unfinished right there that we'll never get to see.
And it's Ethan Hawke and River Phoenix as kids, dude.
Yeah.
Look, if Dante never makes another movie, Griffin, I know you want him to, and he may well make another movie, but do we just do him and just do the whole And Bearing the X as one episode? Like we just try to limit the badness? Because pretty much everything else is good.
I don't really have a problem with the whole.
You don't have but does it need its own episode, or can we just kind of tack it on to the bad movie?
I just truly don't want to end on him.
I know you don't. This is why we've never done Dante. That's your thing. You don't.
I'd
want
like
to
him
end
to
on
make
Bearing the
another.
X.
Yeah, we'll see.
I hope he does. I hope
so too.
That's number 4. Number 5, Griffin, and this is why I wanted to do this weekend, is a film you've mentioned on this episode.
RoboCop.
Nope.
But that is this summer, right?
Yeah, RoboCop is maybe later this summer because it's not here.
Maybe
that comes out in July. Okay. It comes out next week.
Oh, baby. Number 1 at the box office.
That's right. It is.
It's a film I mentioned in this episode. Is it a war film?
No, we mentioned it in the context of one of the actors. It's a teen comedy. It's the debut of another director who we could, I suppose, do on Blank Check. I think he was on the March Madness once.
It's not an Anthony Michael Hall movie?
No.
Teen actor, director we could cover.
He's not a teen actor.
It's a teen comedy, you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Is it Adventures in Babysitting?
It's Adventures in Babysitting.
Oh, wow.
I was like, wait, it can't be that one that we really talked about an extent.
It is. That's
They're
crazy,
out at the
right?
same time. It's
D'Onofrio is on different screens in your multiplex in completely different bodies.
Yeah.
Wait, who directed? Who directed?
Chris Columbus. It's Chris Columbus's first film.
Yeah.
Fuck, right.
It's his directorial, because he wrote Gremlins, obviously, but it's his directorial debut, and he wrote The Goonies, right?
Yeah.
Damn, he really kind of. Jeez. Chris Columbus, one of the nicest people I've ever met. Chris Columbus.
Everyone
really
says that.
A total sweetheart.
Yeah.
Number 6 is The Witches of Eastwick, which obviously we've covered on this podcast. Number 7, Beverly Hills Cop 2. Number 8, The Untouchables, which you mentioned, of course. Number 9 is Spaceballs. which just came out a couple of weeks ago. And then number 10 is Roxanne. It's, some good movies.
Quite a summer.
Yeah.
And look, just to go back to a previous thesis I made, the other 9 movies on that list all are 80s movies. And then in the middle, number 2 is Full Metal Jacket, which does not feel like an 80s. Like every other movie is just like, oh, we're having 80s movie night at the local cinema. You could play any, but if you threw Full Metal Jacket up there, people would be like, really?
We love the 80s.
So odd. Yeah.
We heart 80s.
Michael Ian Black would love to chat about Full Metal Jacket. My college internship was on I Love the 90s Part 2.
Oh, folly I do.
Did you ever do any of the Best Week Ever reboots?
No, I was a PA on the OG Best Week Ever.
Right. And then you were obviously in the Guy Code circuit, but it truly feels like you missed the I Love Thee and the Best Thee by that much. You were there on set.
If I would have started my career like 3 years, it's funny how much talking head comedy is in like the first 8 years of my career, including my 3 years of my Survivor job was like working at VH1 on talking head shows. And then my big quote unquote break, my first acting gigs were being a talking head on a different MTV network. It was humiliating.
Wild. It was just, that was the industry.
It was so indicative of the time. It's like living in New York and you want to work in comedy. It's like if you can't get the Daily Show or SNL, like that's what you have left.
John, VH1,
and I was an extra on 30 Rock. I literally hit all of the 90s, all of the New York jobs you can have at the time.
Did you do that show? It was a pilot that didn't go, but I think it was for VH1 that was like 20s versus 30s.
No.
Do you remember this?
No.
There's 20s? A chance you maybe did this and don't remember it because it was just like everyone got fucking called in for it. But it was like a panel show. It very much, maybe, you know what? If you weren't on it, it was probably because Guy Code was already running and there was a non-compete thing. But it was like, this is what your 20s are like versus this is what your 30s are like. And they'd pick some subject and you'd fucking talk about it. And they had like comedians in their 20s and comedians in their 30s. Years later, when she fucking did the podcast, put together that fucking Nia DaCosta, now director of The Marvels, was the person who like fucking was prompting me off camera for that.
That is so fucking funny.
Because we started emailing about doing the podcast and I was like, and I think we met at like trivia once and she was like, you wouldn't remember this, but I did that stupid fucking thing. And I was the person saying like, so what's it like buying groceries in your 20s? They were just the only thing that people wanted to make for like 10 years there in comedy.
They're kind of dead now, right? Like they don't exist anymore, I feel like.
No, because like
the whole,
TikTok, IG, front-facing camera.
It's all just social media.
Just killed that.
It can't happen fast enough. Like
no.
Best Week Ever was insane because it was a weekly turnaround. Like that was what was crazy about it at the time.
Right.
Now, if you had to wait 4 days to like watch comedy about something that happened in the news, you'd be furious with your wait because
like,
we get it in 6 seconds.
It felt astonishing they could get an entire segment out on Friday night about something that happened on Wednesday, right?
It was crazy. And we thought we were like fucking the newsroom. You know what I mean? Like we were like, we got to get the Bachelorette package in for this week's episode. It's like, we got to transcribe the Chuck Nice interview. You know, there's just always some dumb fucking shit. And of course, every job you're in is like the highest stakes gig you can possibly have. I'm 22 being like, need to find turkey baster footage.
But now you're just like, Twitter has wrung dry Adam Levine's fucking DMs within 12 hours. Right. There's no way you could get it on air fast enough.
You would have to like by the time like if you had a weekly comedy show like that rounds this shit up, you would have to like have the 6th take on Levine.
Yes.
Like you know what I mean? Like you'd have to have like some sort of galaxy brain take that is like somehow no one has gotten
definitive,
to, and that's just embarrassing.
Yeah. You literally cannot upload the files fast enough. John, always a pleasure.
Please.
Seriously.
I was trying to do the take account of the episodes you've been on. Heat, Road Warrior, Full Metal Jacket, like 3
and Too
beyond
Fast and
canonical movies. No, I know.
Oh, I see. Right.
I
You're saying that one's a bit of an outlier.
Yeah. But like you got like Heat, Road Warrior, Full Metal Jacket, arguably all classics within their genres at the like top tier.
Of course. I feel fucking blessed. Also, you bring me in for action shit, which I've
Sure.
watched thousands. Like all the movies you've described are movies I watched when I was 14 and
Right.
40 and had two completely different takes and opinions on them. And it feels so rich to get to talk about it at that level rather than my normal like comedy riffing on jokes about Neil Macaulay's love of metal books. Like getting to fucking analyze it from with the connoisseurs of context themselves.
Tensile strengths. Yeah. Speaking of, though, people should subscribe to Action Boys.
Yeah, actionboys.biz. We have some free episodes if you're just want to listen, get a little sniff, get you hooked. You can find free episodes wherever you get podcasts, but we're on Patreon at actionboys.biz, putting out weekly episodes for over 5 years in the blank check mold of nothing has been under 2 hours ever. As a matter of fact, we have a 3-hour and 40-minute episode about the movie The Program. Like that's like how that's humiliating.
Perfect. And 101 places to party before you die.
Yes, True TV. Use your parents' login. Watch it at the dentist office or wherever the fuck you can get True TV. Get hit by a car, wake up in a hospital, and finally get to watch it.
Be like,
or
True TV, please. Zero in traction.
And they put it on. It's like, oh man, the Jokers.
Oh, it's practical Jokers for 6 hours.
What were you expecting? You put on True TV. It's either fucking playoff hockey or the Jokers. But in between, we got 101 places to party before you die. Buy it on Amazon or whatever. I don't know. We're trying to get a second season. We'll see. Corporate mergers are thrilling for shareholders and brutal for creators.
But also, let's say also bad for consumers.
Yeah. It's truly only good for the investment class. So
absolutely.
Dig in if you have Discovery fucking shares.
Yeah. Thank you for being here. And
thank you for having me. This was a fucking blast. Hair by Leonard. This is the one thing I meant to talk about. What an insane title card at the end of the movie. It just says Hair by Leonard because he does like the classic Kubrick end of credits shit where it's like everyone and there's just Hair by Leonard. I'll send you guys the pic. I could not fucking get over it.
Is he the guy who shaved all the heads?
I'll say
Lenny's just the name of the guy with the buzzer?
His name is Leonard Lewis. He was the world's first celebrity hairdresser. He famously had a salon in Swingin' London, and Stanley Kubrick always used him. And that's why it says Hair by Leonard on many a Kubrick movie.
I mean, this is just
such a great fucking credit to see something like that.
Especially for this one, where this is like almost the least hair in any movie we've covered since THX 1138.
Leonard phoned it in for this one. He just threw someone a razor. It was like, come on, you know what to do. Here's some clippers.
Ermey in the commentary says they use animal shears because they needed it to get like the bigger cinematically get bigger chunks of hair in like one.
Right.
So he's got these guys fucking coming back to shoot for like 4 weeks after and then hitting them with animal shears on the head. That shit hurts, dog.
Wild. Thank you again, Gabrus, and thank you all for listening. Please remember to rate, review, and subscribe. Thank you to Marie Barty for our social media and helping to produce the show. Thank you to AJ McKee and Alex Barron for our editing, Lee Montgomery and the Great American Novel for our theme song, Joe Bowen and Pat Rounds for our artwork, JJ Birch for our research. You can go to blankcheckpod.com for links to some real nerdy shit, including our Patreon Blank Check special features, where we're currently doing the Roger Moore Bond movies. Have you guys watched those for Action Boys?
I think the one we've done, the Chris Walken one. I'm not a big Bond head.
Okay.
That's not Moore though.
That's
right?
a Dalton?
That's
the
Dalton,
Chris Walken one is a Moore. No. Chris Walken.
Oh, it is.
It's
Okay.
more.
That's
It's
Moore.
more being super.
Mhm.
More
View to a
super
Kill.
old. That's what it
Is that? That's the
yeah.
last
Very
one,
old.
right? We haven't gotten to
very
that
old.
yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm. Next on the feed is Octopussy, and then View to a Kill
Great.
shortly after that.
Wild fucking movies.
So crazy.
Yeah, low key wild, low key a little wild.
Hosley, I'll see you in the Trashman fan forums. We're always in there. That's where we keep up.
And tune in next week for Eyes Wide Shut, our final Stanley Kubrick episode.
That's right.
And then we should say, Well, no, we'll announce whatever at the end of the
Announce
episode.
it next week. Announce it next week. People figured it out.
Anyway, thank you all for listening.
Uh-huh.
And as always,
uh-huh.
I don't know how I got myself into like
now you're like, stop laughing! You bag it!
I can't. I have to use David's hands to choke myself.